guests, ladies and gentlemen, wish you a very good afternoon and a warm welcome to the third edition of Confluence, Mahindra World City's Thought Leadership Forum. My name is Shyam Kalyanasundram, part of the Mahindra World City team, and it's my privilege to host this very distinguished audience at the third edition. As the global focus on urbanization as a means to a more equitable, inclusive, and resource-efficient future intensifies, it's time to redefine our approach to building cities that last. Today's thriving urban environments are dense, diverse, and offer a multitude of opportunities to their citizens. They have roads, ICT infrastructure, ports, airports, and public transportation that help citizens move around seamlessly. They are connected and competitive because they convey a strong desire to be bold, ambitious, and forward-looking to their citizens. New cities need to imbibe from the lessons of the ancient cities. Tanjore evolved around the big temple and became a generator of life. Similarly, in modern times, the university can evolve as a temple of learning. Silicon Valley, evolving around Stanford University, is an example to study. At Mahindra World City, it is the industries that have become the center of relevant enterprise. New cities have the potential to inspire urban stakeholders for generations to come. Their achievements will become references and may foster urban innovation around the world. Contrary to the predecessors, new cities today are playing on a global stage from the outset. As urban competition grows, they need to address the challenges of climate change, design flexible urban form and policies, and create innovative environments. The challenge of the centuries of cities are large enough for bold experiments to be conducted. None, however, should underestimate the importance of understanding the person it is being built for. In planning for their ideal resident, what might be a new city builder's blind spots, and how could they discover them? This is of special relevance to the developing world, which is burgeoning with issues of rapid population increase, increasing levels of urbanization, and aging demographics, among others. As Mahindra World City continues its journey to transform urban landscapes by creating sustainable communities, Confluence epitomizes our search for collective learning and discovery. Can we have the AV, please? Thank you. We have an illustrious set of speakers and panelists for this event. I hope each one of you has received the Confluence kit that has the program details and also the profiles of the panelists and speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to welcome Mr. Arun Nanda, Chairman Mahindra Lifespace Developers Limited and Chairman Mahindra Holidays and Resorts India Limited to deliver the opening address. Mr. Nanda joined the Mahindra Group in 1973 and held several important positions within the group over the 40 years he was with the company. He was inducted to the board of Mahindra & Mahindra in August 1992 and resigned as the executive director in March 2010 to focus on the social sector and create a favorable ecosystem for senior citizens. He was a non-executive director from April 2010 till August 2014. Mr. Nanda was honored with the Chevalier Award by the President of French Republic, Mr. Nicolas Sarkozy, in 2008. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Arun Nanda.
Thank you, Shyam. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and let me add my warm welcome to all of you. In the Mahindra Group, we have always engaged in initiatives having a larger positive social impact. For those of you who don't know, when we started in 1945, the first thing we did was build off-road vehicles for the development of the country because we did not have roads in this country. Then as the agricultural revolution started, the second product we got into was tractors. And since then it's been history. As a part of the same DNA, Mahindra Lifespaces, our mission is to transform urban landscapes by creating sustainable communities. We believe that well-planned cities need to have a strong focus on the pillars of triple bottom line: social, economic, and environment considerations. Over lunch, I was talking to the acting US ambassador that, for example, he said, how did you manage to get land around the time when everybody was having a problem? And I said, we did two things, right? One was, Rajasthan's a water deficient state, and we announced upfront that all non-potable water, we will take the city's sewage and convert it into water for air conditioning and flushing systems and gardening and all that. And second is, we worked with the local community and we did not acquire land forcibly. We gave them developed land. That's a part of the DNA of the group. And based on that philosophy and mission, Confluence was conceived as a forum for engaging with diverse stakeholders who participate in creation of urban ecosystem. The objective is to catalyze participation, collaboration, exchange of ideas across issues related to urban development. The theme of this conference is to build cities that last. And we seek to explore the various dimensions, complexities, and relationships that go into making a city eternal. At this point, I would like to thank two ladies who conceived the idea and made it happen. Ms. Anita Arjun Das, who is the Managing Director and CEO of Mahindra Life Spaces, and my dear colleague Sangeeta, the person who relentlessly and passionately has been driving this for the last few years. Ladies and gentlemen, when I was a child, I used to read Mahatma Gandhi saying, India lives in villages, and that had been the philosophy. That may have been true at that time, with due respect to Mahatma Gandhi and our political leaders of the 50s and 60s. Today, cities drive both national and international economies, generating 80% of the world GDP, and we cannot afford to ignore those cities. These cities need attention. Particularly in India, where we need to create 10 million jobs a year, and our track record shows that in the best of times, we achieved 8.9 million. So we have a huge task ahead with us, and with limited land and most of it irrigated, I think job creation is either going to happen in the cities or non-agricultural avenues in semi-urban areas. Majority of the cities in India have a population below 1 million, yet when you hear any politician or any leader from the government or private sector, everybody talks of mega cities. World's urban population today stands at 3.9 billion. Half of that is in small cities, and small cities are defined with a population of less than 500,000. You know why I am emphasizing that point. Only 12% of the total global population come from megacities. In 2050, the urban population is expected to be 6.2 billion, and only 10% of that, or maybe less, will come from megacities. So, I think we need to rethink our philosophy. Indian city systems are broken. We need to fix it urgently if we want to prepare for the unprecedented population growth that is to follow. Most of our cities need rejuvenation and strengthening. This can be achieved through a combination of basic infrastructure, upgrades, reorganization of land use. I think land use rules have to be looked at very carefully, and improved connectivity. In today's jargon, I'm an old generation, young people will say, I'm trying to learn from young people, I feel like to. They'll say, we need to revive, upgrade, plug in, strengthen, and connect. But there are no blanket solutions, and one size does not fit all. Different cities have different potentials, and I think we need to categorize cities which have similarities, like, for example, a port city, industrial city, tourism city, heritage city, capital cities, and then work around common philosophies around those rather than trying to have a universal package. There are cities which can have educational hubs. We know in United States, they call them college towns. We also need to have a better understanding of trends and growth patterns because normally we have worked on historical experience. I think if we have seen the pace of change in the last few years, what used to take a generation to change started changing in 10 years, and what used to take 10 years is changing in less than 2 years. So our planning has to be reflexive and responsive to future changes. Planning is meant to be few steps ahead of urban growth rather than trying to catch up. I'm sorry that most of the places that I visit, whether in the country or outside, people are normally trying to play a catch-up game. You know, I give hats off to the engineers who designed the Bombay's water and sewage system. It was designed 100 years ago, and our population has multiplied, 30 or 40 times since then, and the system still survives. So, that's the sort of vision you need to have when you start planning. In India, urbanization has always, unfortunately, outpaced urban planning because the political focus till recently, was on villages and rural development. As a result, today we are in a unique situation. We are having simultaneously to play catch up and also move up to what we call smart or integrated cities. That's a challenge, and a linear approach to planning will not work. And I'm hoping that this seminar will come out with ideas which will help us, with the thanks to our knowledge partner, Shirish is sitting here. We need to strategize in a multi-dimensional and multi-temporal manner that is working simultaneously from the bottom, ground level solutions. I think one of the things that have been missed globally is taking community participation in the planning. And I think you need to have community as a part of the planning process because they are the end users. Like when you design a shoe or a dress, you take what the consumer wants, but we don't do it when we plan cities. And also across different time spans, planning for future growth while also making adjustments to accommodate existing demands. This will require collaboration across administrative and political hierarchies as well as across disciplines. The need for a tech company is very different from a retailer, and the need of a retailer is very different from what a manufacturing industry wants. And I think we need to get a cross-sectional teams to understand what is required and prescribe and do that rather than being prescriptive because I know everything. With due respect to everybody, I think we need town planners, we need economists, we need government, we need bureaucrats, but we also need the users as a key component of the planning process. Under the current governance structure, that is why my personal opinion is that either you have to follow a PPP model, but a little different from what we saw 10-15 years ago, and we need a real PPP. We should not use PPP just to get the government land or something like that. Or better still, and we have a lot of people here from the multilateral organization, I think we need to encourage young people to create social enterprises for profit but with a cause, and I think that is what will help us. In the past few years, so many new ideas have been brought in. I think we ideate too much. We now need to move to the execution mode and a time-bound execution mode. And I am hoping that this conference on Confluence will help us find the right way forward. Before the bell rings, I had some examples to give you, but before the bell rings, because he's not yet been made the KMP, it will be at the next board meeting. But I just want to give one or two examples. In Brazil, they were the first ones when they made Curitiba. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Bus rapid transit system was the first one. And they were able to create 52 square kilometers of green space, 52 square meters of green space per person. But I think they did something very interesting. For garbage collection, they started giving coupons for food. So if you gave 2 kilos of garbage or 20 kilos of garbage, you got a coupon for 1 kilo of rice. People have done that. Those of us who've been visiting Dubai for a few years, you remember from the time when you left the World Trade Center area, you only saw desert. And now it has net zero emissions, water reuse system, and they are also doing what they call urban agriculture. I have lots of examples, but you all are well read, you would know about it. But I want to end with a quote which Sangeeta shared with me from a philosopher, thinker. And this is more for my friends who are historians and media. Civilization, the stream with banks, the stream is sometimes with blood from people killing, stealing, shouting, and doing things historians usually record. While on the banks, unnoticed, people build homes, make love, raise children, sing songs, write poetry, and even whittle statues. The story of civilization is the story of what happened on the banks. And we should stop writing what happened in the river, and we should start concentrating on the banks. With these few words, gentlemen and ladies, I wish the Confluence great success, and thank you for your active participation. A big thank you to McKinsey for being the knowledge partner, and thank you from all my colleagues who are going to share their thoughts with us today. And have a great afternoon.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful and thought-provoking address. Robert Park, the American sociologist, in his book The City, remarked, "The city is a state of mind, a body of customs and traditions, and the organized attitudes and sentiments that inhere in these customs and are transmitted with this tradition. The city is not, in other words, merely a physical mechanism and an artificial construction. It is involved in the vital processes of the people who compose it. It's a product of nature and of particularly human nature. The key to the emergence of a successful community is the potential offered by the city for the growth and development of its residents. It has to enable its citizens to establish roots, identify with the place, and work diligently to sustain it. The city should create job opportunities, create wealth, offer services, and run the affairs of the city efficiently, and a successful community will naturally follow. It's my honor to invite Mr. Sirish Sankhe, Senior Partner, McKinsey & Company, who will moderate the first panel discussion on cities, learnings and experiences. The panelists are visionaries who have contributed to sustainable urbanization by conceptualizing, building and managing cities across diverse regions. May I invite Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, TERI, Mr. Ajay Pandey, Managing Director and Group CEO, GIFT City, Mr. Ravindra Sannareddy, Managing Director, Sri City, Mr. Shaishav Daria, Regional CEO, Lodha Group, Mr. Ian Pang, Director General, Investment Operations of Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank, and Mr. Sujay Bose, CEO, National Investment and International Finance Corporation Infrastructure Fund.
So this particular panel, is a panel of practitioners, a panel of people with cold, hard facts who tried to get new cities going in India. Probably one of the most difficult environment to get new cities going. This panel is going to focus on building new cities in India and building them to last. Right. So I'm very fortunate to have more or less 90% of India that has built new cities represented in this room today, including, of course, our Mahindra colleagues, right? And the reason it's very important is, the numbers that India is going to go from somewhere like 300 million urban population to 600 million urban population, increase of 300 million people, right? But most of it is going to be happening in existing cities, many of them in mega cities, So there's a natural question on what is the role of new cities? Why should even build? Let the existing cities expand and let's take care of urbanization that way. But the new cities play a very, very important role. It's sort of the cutting edge of planning, cutting edge of sustainability, cutting edge of all the advanced thinking that Mr. Nanda talked about, right? While making the cold, hard facts of IRR successful, because many of the new cities in India are not backed by the infinite coffers of the government. Okay, it is within the IRR constraints of a private sector people, right? So it's very interesting to say how do you get new cities going, and out of the 300 million people, almost 25 million people, at least our own projection said, should be actually housed in new cities. So that is close to 10%. We are nowhere close, by the way, and even the new cities are not taking off at the level it should, right? But it has a very important role. Last fact before we go to our panelist. Our experience and our analysis say that only 20 to 30% of the new cities around the world actually succeed. Another negative way of putting it to say 70% of the new cities actually fail. And they fail because of, not because 20 years later there is nothing there, even though Mr. Pang will talk to you about several dozens ghost cities in China where everything is built but nobody is living there. It is not just about livability, occupancy, but something or the other goes wrong, right? Either the occupancy doesn't come in, either the jobs are not there, either the bus doesn't happen, either the community doesn't come together, and the soul of the city doesn't get created. It's a massive unsolved problem, I would say, even worldwide. Okay, so what you guys are trying to create is indeed, I think, pioneering, and therefore this particular session is going to focus on what does it take to get that virtuous cycle of new cities going. Okay, so with that, I think the panelists are already introduced. Okay, but I'll just tell you why they are here. Okay, and Mr. Ravindra Sanareddy is one of the pioneers of new cities, with having created the Shri City. His title is Managing Director of Shri City, and some very interesting examples of how to create a massive number of jobs, especially manufacturing, and how to create a city around it. Okay. Mr. Pang has been in many roles, right? Right now he's the Director General of AIIB, but probably even more interesting will be your role as the ex-CEO of Surbana International, and your role in Ascendas, which I don't know how many new cities you have built outside India, but it's a very interesting, it's a very interesting background for us to talk about, right? Mr. Sujay Bose, when we invited him, asked us, why is he here? Okay, and we said that you perhaps is one of the most important persons in the panel, because every time for new city creation, when we put the numbers together, and we did just for the city of Amravati, we came up with a number of 90,000 crores, which is close to $10–15 billion over 20 years. And out of that, only a small amount has come in initially. So you have to get the funding cycle going. And even the initial amounts for a large new city can be as high as 10,000 crores. Where does it come from? Where does the patient capital come from? That's why you are here. Dr. Ajay Mathur, you really represent the next generation thought on sustainability, and we'd like to really learn from you on how can we really incorporate sustainability, right? And is it NPV positive if we take a private sector approach, right? Mr. Ajay Pandey, GIFT is known all over the world. It's one of the few cities which is focused on a particular sector, great infrastructure, at the same time many challenges. We'd like to talk to you about that. And Shaishav Dharia is one of the few people who have created a 4,000-acre city, which is, I would say, in its mid-cycle, maybe 10 years ago, it got created, and when I visited it, I was quite impressed with many thoughtful elements of livability. Okay. So that's our panel. I'm very happy to have the panel which have really made sure that how things work on the ground, on what can be done and what cannot be done. Now I'll start with three themes I'm going to talk about. One of them is job creation. And job creation is one of the most important livelihood is one of the most important pillars of new city. If you don't get it, and there are very many cities which are so-called ghost town or unlivable because the job creation did not work. Mr. Sanareddy, maybe I can start. Maybe I can start with you to say that how did you think about job creation? I hear that you see a hockey curve, sort of a hockey stick in job creation. You're already at, I think, 35,000 in Sri City. How do you see about this job creation, skilling, what sectors? What is your experience in job creation and livelihood creation in a new city?
Good afternoon. First, I want to thank Mr. Arun Nanda, Anita, and Sangeeta for inviting me here. Just to give a background, Sri City is located 55 kilometers from Chennai, just on the border of Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. So we used Shenzhen model, how Shenzhen got developed using Hong Kong strength. We wanted to develop Sri City using Chennai strength. Similar experiment was done before. Hosur was developed using Bangalore strength in India. So we went with that model. So we initially went what are the good industries that are based in Chennai. That is mostly engineering, automotive engineering, light engineering, and electronics. These are the 3-4 segments we focused on. And when we started this project in 2008, I happened to be son of the soil. I grew up in that area, so we know the landscape. So we had good relations with all the, like Mr. Nanda mentioned, we included all the farmers into the land acquisition. Our land acquisition was the most successful. We acquired 8,000 acres in a consent-based acquisition without problem. We promised the jobs. So initially we thought to create these jobs, we have to find some low wage, and because it was the most backward area in Andhra Pradesh, state of Andhra Pradesh. There was not even a degree college until we went there. So obviously if we bring some high-tech jobs, it is not going to succeed for many reasons, including lack of resources. So we went with all these, where with semi-skilled, skilled, we brought in people like ILFS, converted this agrarian labor into industrial workers, started showing them as a resources immediately available. We brought in some of the assembly, for ladies, toy making, and some garments where you can train people within, say, 3 to 4 months kind of thing, 2 weeks to 4 months.
That skill building experience is quite interesting. You should talk more about it. How did you really build the skills of the people who almost had no skills?
Yeah, because this was more of a commitment. See, we guaranteed a job for each household. The people which had land, and also there were another category called landless labor. They were living, or the jobs that were giving through that land. We chose a dry area, about 70% is dry lands and 30% wetlands. So we had a very small population there. Total jobs we had to create in those days were about 3,000. So we started Sri City HRD Academy, brought in ILFS as a partner. Started initially when we are acquiring such a large land mass, we need a lot of security guards. We need a lot of construction workers. Then we need some of the housekeeping, assuming the industry comes. These are all easy to train people. So we roped in ILFS as the partner and started training them. And then in 2008, we did our groundbreaking and then started building our infrastructure. That is when we started attracting the industry. So first few people basically came, like our IT revolution happened in India, for value buying, because they saw a big value difference between lands in Chennai versus lands in Andhra Pradesh. So it has all the connectivity, but at an affordable price kind of thing. Once we developed our infrastructure, then some of the biggies, like all these large enterprises like Cadbury's, you asked how it became hockey stick. So the 2008, 9, 10 went into our infrastructure building. That is also when world was in recession. That is one of the good things we have done. We just raised private equity, so we have to spend that money. So we went on spending on the infrastructure. That gave the confidence for all these MNCs who are coming into India.
So you sort of created a virtuous cycle of job creation. I think in India, your story is one of the impressive stories of a rapid job creation, right?
So
Maybe I can move.
I just finished one, since
sure.
you asked about jobs, that 35,000 car. Since we got all these large ones, they started building 11, 12. So the factories got ready in 14, so they started employing. Last year, because of our whatever focus on Make in India and electronics, we got a customer called Foxconn, which one factory alone created 10,000 jobs. That is how that hockey stick experiment went. In 1 year we were able to.
We went enormously, exactly. And you have to create different skills probably for the Foxconn people.
In fact, they took care of it.
They took care of it.
They took care of it.
So, Mr. Pandey, you're on the other side of the spectrum on one level. You position the GIFT City as a hub for higher end services, middle end services. So it's a lot more services. and also a sort of an alternate financial hub. So how is your experience of job creation, especially on the higher end? What is working? What could work better?
So first and foremost, I think what is important from our perspective is that you focus on something through which the identity of the city should get created. Because I think standalone, if you try to do anything and everything for anybody and everyone, I think that's going to be a very tough task. So we focused on financial services, and we tried to put the enablers in place, including various permissions from government, central government, state government, and others to try and, So once these enablers were in place, we began to see people coming in. But I think the point to be highlighted is this is probably the only city in the country where world-class infrastructure has been put in place, because we wanted to set an example that if you're really going to attract world-class talent, and I'll probably give an example later on. People coming in there should feel that, there is a reason for them to move in. Okay? Something as basic as water from the tap is potable water. I mean, when we go out, everybody looks for to say that, that's possible overseas. Why can't it be possible in India? All people from abroad, when they come to India, the first advice they get is watch out for water. Right. Something as basic as that. So I think there are multiple elements of world-class infrastructure that was kind of created to ensure that high-end talent moves in and gets to feel the real benefit in terms of quality of life. And I think that was one way of doing it. Second thing what we did was we have partnered with almost all the 3 or 4 universities which are surrounding us. I mean, we are surrounded by IIT, Petroleum University, IIMs and others. And there are many stakeholders that have got involved, and we are now running special courses on some of the financial services capabilities, including some of the certification courses. So there is an ecosystem which is beginning to develop. That's how it's sort of shaping up.
Yeah. So, but still, to create a brand new sector like financial services in Gujarat, I guess you had to focus on infrastructure as well as to see what type of value prop you create in the city for that.
Yeah. So I think the answer is that you create a hardware, which is the infrastructure side of it, and the software, which are the various enablers. And I think it's a combination of these two which begin to click in. And then if you envelope all of this with this element of quality of life, and something as basic as saying, I have no hesitation in saying, so we have someone like Oracle working with us. Oracle is a name that is known to everyone. They've had 150 people, high-end work. Their global HR modules, software development happens there. In entire 1 year, only 2 people left the job, which is the lowest attrition rate Oracle has ever encountered across their global development centers. And now we are also doing study to see that this quality of water, quality of air, how much of impact it is having, even in terms of the health and insurance and all of other stuff, which is all translating in terms of quality of life of people.
So, in fact, you talked about the next topic that I was going to touch upon, which is livability, quality of living, and community. The McKinsey research on this said that 25,000 jobs is what starts creating the virtuous cycle of a city. But the same research also says that actually job creation alone is not enough. There are a whole set of examples of ghost towns where people come, work, and go back to the city, right? And even in some of the new cities in India, we see that phenomenon. So to get people to stay there, okay, and create a community and create a world-class living, it's a big challenge, right? And that, by the way, is not a completely cracked problem. And I hope that in this panel, we begin to get a sense of what does that take to create that virtuous cycle of living. Maybe at this time, I go to Shaishav Dharia, because in Palawa, the interesting thing is that maybe because of Mumbai being close by, they didn't focus on job creation at all, right? They focused on livability and getting people to stay there, right? So what are some of the interesting insights from that? What came first? How did you get people? You're probably one of the highest number of people living in a new city in terms of its own percentages, right? Yeah. And I understand you are getting help from Mumbai, but when I visited you, I saw lots of interesting things. Maybe you want to talk about the livability parameters that really make a city buzz.
Sure. So just as a context, right? Yes, let's assume that we already have a gift city or a Sri city in the Dombivli region and the Navi Mumbai region that existed for Palava. So Palava is about 5,000 acres between Thane, Navi Mumbai and Kalyan Dombivli. So those who are familiar with Mumbai. So you started off with that advantage that there was jobs about 30, 40 minutes away. And we primarily played on the urbanization trend and the lack of quality, affordable housing the city had at that point. So Palava gets known reasonably well for being a smart city. But we think of the word CCTV slightly differently. And I think, Shirish, that will give you the answer of what it takes to bring people in. So CCTV for us means citizen, community, technology, and vision, right? So first it starts with citizen. To bring the first set of people inside, we know which were the kind of people we were targeting on the urbanization trend. So for them, 24/7 water, power, safe environment, and more importantly, school, education for their kids. This is what they were really lacking in the nearby areas. So you had to first start with at least this physical aspect being ready, because that is the first jump. You need the first fair of people coming in, and most of them happen to be working 30, 40 minutes away. Fortunately, the road connectivity was good. What was missing was train. So we ran our own train, our own buses that went from Palava to all the commercial districts nearby, free of cost. So that way, we got people to first move in. Second was the community aspect. So here the emphasis was both on the physical and the digital, because about 70% of our population works in the ITS segment in the nearby area. 20% are professionals or small business owners, and about 10% are retired seniors. So each one has a different sense. This was something we learned from Melbourne, which was like at any suburban district or any borough, you start with a center of a 1 square kilometer, which has basically education, retail, and some amount of amenities. So we have within each of our initial set of developments a clubhouse, sports facilities, places of worship, a school. This becomes the community point where people start engaging with each other. And when you build a new city, they've got to start developing those bonds. So that became a very important aspect as the core part of community. Then we supplemented it with placemaking. We tied up with a lot of people. So every week there were classes, whether it was singing, dance, music, there were festivals. And you had to do this literally round the year so that they never felt the reason to leave Palava unless they had to visit family. On the digital side, today our Facebook page has about 60,000 active users. The number is far larger. These are basically citizens. It becomes a great way for them to communicate amongst each other, for us to share what's happening in the city. And now they actually call themselves Palavites. They don't say, we are citizens of Mumbai, but we're actually Palavites. That's the first change of a community. Third is technology. It's important to understand that you are taking, city tax for maintenance, building tax for maintaining a building, from people who have never actually paid this ever before. So they become damn demanding. I can't even explain to you that if they give you what we would think is a small amount, the expectation is significant. That's where technology comes in a large way, because you want to try to deliver their needs and quality of service in a cost-efficient manner. So for example, we don't have any security guards in any building in the city. And they find it very difficult to understand how that can happen. That's where CCTV cameras, we have dog squads, we have patrol guards. All of that goes into basically creating the safe, secure environment connected to a command center. It took about a year and a half of education, everything to explain why it works and how it lowers the cost of delivery. The last part is vision. We have obviously a lot of vision when you start off what you want to achieve. One of it was participative governance, right? The important part of this is that you don't let go if you want people to continue moving in. And participative citizenship is not easy. First of all, we are no experts in it. We are doing trial and error to some extent. But we've now every weekend by function, we have participative councils between residents and the city to understand what we're not doing well, what we should do differently. They start feeling a voice in it, because then you're also able to explain why sometimes you're taking hard actions to sustain the city. So this is the CCTV principle that's allowed us to now have about 50,000 people living in the city today.
Yeah, the whole aspect of placemaking, community vision, I think it's where you really have to understand your stakeholders and put something together that works. And once it works, it becomes a virtuous cycle. For a city which doesn't have Mumbai though close by, how to create that is a challenge by itself. I would like to ask Mr. Pang about your experience outside India on successful cities and creating this community livability. What work? What are some of the most interesting examples? What are the principles? Job creation, everybody understands to some extent, but this livability, community, and so on are topics that needed to be really focused on. How is your experience on that?
Perhaps before I answer the question direct, I think let's talk about an important C in urbanization, which is competition. Building cities is about competing with the next city. It's about competing with the existing city. It's about competing with the future cities. All right? It's about competing to stay relevant to the economy. So the fact that you're going to invest, you build it doesn't mean that people will come, investment will come. So it is a competition to stay relevant. So for that competition to stay relevant, there are inherent strengths of each location. All right, and therefore that explains why you mentioned about the ghost towns in China, because they are not relevant at all. And there's a pure wastage of capital after going in, investing. And there are successful cities like Suzhou Industrial Parks. These are parks that mix the whole region of Jiangsu very successful, and in Guangzhou there are huge industrial development because it utilizes the chip label in the 1990s of China. So there are reasons why cities are built. All right. So in that sense, cities would have to compete, and that's not about emerging. It's also about continuing to stay relevant. Put it this way: Singapore. If you look at Singapore, I come from Singapore. Singapore in the 1800s, all right, was made relevant by competing against Malacca, and therefore it stayed relevant and continued to grow. And look at Malacca, it basically for our place, all right. It doesn't mean that you are relevant now, you will be relevant tomorrow, all right. So what makes a place competitive are the thoughts that we need to come through. And one of the other C that come in is connectivity. There is a direct correlation between GDP per capita versus the number of connections of that particular location. It can be a city, it can be a town, it can be a village, all right? In Japan, in US, cities and towns are made irrelevant when highways bypass them. This is a natural thing. It will happen. If you lose your connection, you lose everything. And therefore, if you are building a city, every day you must be thinking of how to enhance your connectivity. US, with a quarter of Chinese population, has 400 airports, and the Chinese only have 130. All right? Well, of course, you can say it's a chicken and egg issue, all right? But the city or the country that is more conscious about its connectivity will stay ahead, will always stay ahead. And then the third C, the capital. That's where Sujay and myself are involved in the investment front. The money has to come in, all right? And how to utilize the private sector money is now the formula. The governments of today are constrained by their fiscal position, are constrained by their foreign reserves, and so on and so forth. All right, it's now about utilizing private capital. And we can see the examples here today that cities in China, in India, are utilizing private capital to build it up. All right, so I think if all these three C's can be aligned in those ways, and then there will be sustainability and there will be success. That's my perspective. Thanks.
The importance of competition, I think, naturally comes into play because many new cities actually not only have to compete on cities on the other coast, but they most of the time have to compete with the city immediately next door, right? If you are next to Chennai, then you are actually competing with Chennai as well, right? If you are next to Jaipur, you are competing with Jaipur. On one side, you can say Indian cities is no competition, but they have the virtuous cycle going for them, right? Even in the bad infrastructure that is there. So the whole competition, I think, is an important and interesting insight, and the connectivity is another interesting insight. Thank you, Mr. Pang. So we moved from job creation to some extent livability, and at the end, any of you have any other questions or any of the panelists have more points on this, we'll come to that. But we'll move to an important element of livability, sustainability, right? Many years ago, when we were designing the city and planning, many of the sustainability elements were good to show, but not really to put, because they were NPV negative, they were quite difficult. But it has, I think, changed substantially, both because of technology, people's expectations, what's happening around us in terms of pollution, water scarcity, and so on. So, Dr. Mathur, really, it's a question for you, is how should new cities embrace sustainability? What of the sustainability elements really work? And how will that change, you think, going forward? This encompasses a lot of things, I know. Water, electricity, solar, but any of these sustainability elements, it will be good to talk to you. You have seen this for many years.
Thanks. Many of these things are, for example, take solar.
Yeah.
In solar, if you go in for rooftop solar, it becomes a private investment. If you're talking of solar being put out as a utility-based, then you and I are paying for it.
Right.
The challenge, of course, in solar is how much can you do on the rooftop? If you have dense cities means that the amount of rooftop per person is not very much. The short point to that is we need to find out what is an optimal density that we plan for. There is this oft-quoted example of Atlanta versus Barcelona. Two cities, approximately equal incomes, equal populations, but Atlanta is 8 times as spread as Barcelona is. In spite of the fact that Atlanta has a lot of high-rise buildings, Barcelona has relatively few. But Barcelona seems to have found that the 4 or 5-storied building is a good compromise. You can get a lot of people, and the setbacks that are there with high-rise buildings are not there. What it also does is it provides a lot of roof space, which allows a lot more solar to be put than if you have only high-rise buildings. Now, obviously, if you have an island city like Bombay, the amount of 5-storied buildings will never be adequate. So, yes, of course, there is a locality-specific issue to this.
Right.
The second issue relates, I think the best example is given by water.
Right.
Or even more than water, by sewage treatment.
Sewage.
There is almost no existing city in India where all sewage is collected and transferred to a sewage treatment plant. This is a challenge. Yet, if we look at newer developments in which many of you have been associated, take the example of Bangalore, where every new multi-stored building has to have its own sewage effluent treatment plant. That has happened largely because technology and economics have come to a point where it makes economic sense to the people who live in the building, and the technology is such that you can actually locate it where you have a high-rise building. So the challenge, therefore, is one is of space, whether it's electricity or sewage, similarly with water, one is of space. And the other is, how do you get these technologies down to a price that you and I are willing to afford? And here I think issues related to upscaling and upscaling in a manner that competition occurs and prices come down is something that we need to investigate far more than we have done so far. Short point, sustainability is doable, but it's a step at a time.
Thank you. I think, as I said, that it's a very interesting point. Solar, water, sewage, and energy, water, sewage, walk to work, green, all this which used to be luxuries 10 years ago, are, I think, not only necessities will get incorporated, but you brought out a very important point, which is the role of planning. Overall integrated planning. It should not be an afterthought, right, that we will do X and Y.
One of the things that I'd like to add is, and this goes to the earlier discussion about new cities.
Right.
I moved to this city about 35 years.
Right.
Since then, there have been 8 or 9 new
cities
built around here.
Yes.
Whether it is Gurgaon or Noida or Dwarka or Rohini or whatever, each of these is a new town.
City.
And the interesting thing at least about Delhi, but similarly it's happening in Mumbai, is that because we are developing into towns with multiple business centers, many of these have become cities in which the long-term commutes are relatively limited. I was completely taken aback that the average commute in Delhi is actually 7 kilometers. It kind of surprised me. I expected it to be 17. But what it tells us is that the concept of a city with multiple centers is far more effective than having one central business district.
Yeah. This whole point that we are building new cities all through, and especially around our metropolitan centers, is absolutely true. Unfortunately, the thinking that goes in terms of planning, governance, sustainability, and that's why what the practitioners are doing in terms of new cities, in fact, has to be applied to many of these cities. Any other point from the panel on sustainability? Is sustainability? Are you using sustainability actively in your cities? Is it NPV positive? Which one works? Which one? Just a minute on this from any of the panelists.
I think it works quite well now. One is, if you are thinking of building a city, obviously you're talking of decades. Automatically the answer becomes you have to become sustainable, especially on precious resources. You talked about water and recycling. Water costs in Mumbai or India for that matter are still quite subsidized compared to what it should be. Where we are in Palava, actually we pay 3 times the cost of water that the island city of Mumbai pays, right? So that's how much is subsidized in the island city. It's only going to go up. So the interesting thing was we have a BOO model, the first of its kind with GE, wherein we don't pay for the capex. For every liter of water they treat and give back to us for landscape or flushing use, that's what we pay for, right? And the water cost that is given back to us is actually almost equal to the cost of potable water. Now, even today, it's absolutely viable, and in the future, it's going to become even more viable. So now, sustainability and economics both are aligned together and can work great.
So I'll just add one example. We are a zero discharge city, so anything and everything that comes out gets recycled, reused. But one of the best uses that we are doing for the wastewater is we take that water, it is recycled, we cool it, and we have district cooling mechanism in the entire city, which is 30% cost efficient, both in terms of noise and maintenance and otherwise, right? So you're also doing the recycling for the water. You chill it, you sort of then pump it, heat exchangers. There are no noises, there are no individual air conditioners in the building, right? So at some stage, this equation is beginning to sort of, work well.
Yeah, I think we are one of the few cities, I don't know whether there's anybody else.
So district cooling is there in T3 in Delhi.
Yeah.
However, at a city level, we are the first in the country. Yeah.
So an interesting example, right? So we discuss job creation, we discuss livability, we discuss sustainability. I have 2 more topics. I'll come to funding and financing. But before that, the point you made on connectivity, okay, and connectivity, not digital connectivity, I'm talking about now physical connectivity, and I have a question for the panel again. You know, most of these planning, because perhaps they are done by the private sector, are basically based on roads as a principle, you know, as a principal way of connectivity, right? And only when you have so much congestion that you can't go anymore, then we start thinking about public transport. So this whole issue of transportation for new cities, okay, or even transportation for this existing new cities around existing cities is something that is really bothering us, because in Amravati, for example, Mr. Ram Manohar is not here. We are trying to figure out what type of transportation solution we use, because the general answer on the planning front was build a bunch of roads. They look beautiful. By the way, they all work for the first 10 years, and in the 12th year, suddenly you have so much congestion, then you start thinking about metro or, you know, bus rapid transit. It's too late, right? Just a question for the panel, since you are involved in new cities, and I know this you cannot perhaps do on your own. What is this transportation solution, public transportation solution for new cities that either you have looked at or you will recommend? And I know you have looked at it to some extent, maybe with government help. But what is that? Because that, I think, is the holy grail I consider of Indian cities, because if you don't connect them physically, it just simply does not work, and then all other issues occur that are there with transportation. Any thoughts from the panel on public transportation for new cities?
Yeah, this is a very important part of sustainability, is the intra-city transportation. I think a lot of us have taken traffic jams as a norm, and we have accepted the fact. But there lies too much inefficiency, and it degrades quality of life as though we are boiling a frog without noticing that we are actually dying. We are losing time, all right, on the streets. I think what is happening that we see in AIIB is that Indian cities are getting to understand this. We are seeing no less than 7 cities requesting for metros. All right, this is a phenomena. Probably you don't see so many sets of metros coming out, and these are metros that has already been planned and in the midst of looking for capital and looking for funding. I would ask that why is it so late? Right, the planners and the municipals should be asking themselves why such facilities is an afterthought. It should have been part of the master plan. It should have been thought through as the city progress.
Yeah.
All right. So it is fundamental to the professional culture, the way we do our work as urbanization professional, and I being an urbanization professional, I always take responsibility for the cities I am involved. For example, in Singapore, and Singapore itself also have its chapter. If you know, the Singapore government was beaten quite badly in 2011 elections because there's a massive breakdown in the public transport system, not able to cater to its growing population. So as urban professionals, I urge my fellow professionals to look at this and take it upon as our professional responsibility rather than passing it to the governments per se. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, yeah, Mr. Nanda, you wanted to ask a question?
I wanted to give an example, if I may.
Yeah, please do.
I have 2 very modest ladies sitting here.
Right.
Can we give him a... What our team did was, which I think is one of the smartest.
Right.
We built a railway station and handed over to the government. Cheapest possible solution.
Excellent.
We were close to a railway track. We built a railway station and handed over to the government. The clients were happy. They were not required. Infosys and Wipro and others didn't have to transport people from the city in buses.
Right.
The employees were happy. I mean,
Right.
the biggest joy I got was when I stood at the station and saw these 20-something old coming
from
smiling,
the train.
fresh, and not cooked up in a bus in 2 hours. So I think you have to think. And the credit goes to these two humble, modest ladies.
Ladies around you. Thank you. You wanted to make a point in a minute? Yeah.
What I wanted to say was that we have kind of got our overall transportation plan integrated with the government itself. There are 2-3 things that we have done for gift. First and foremost, till the time the metro comes in, and we have planned metro stations in such a fashion that out of all the 83 towers that are coming up, even if you have to walk, you will not have to walk more than 500 meters to go to these metro station. So that's, so it is, it's actually planned that way. Second thing is, till that whole thing takes, shape, the problem in India majority of the times is that the arteries are there, the issues with the first mile and the last mile. And I think as cities which are coming up, and in fact he gave an example of reaching out to bus, wherever it's possible, we have begun to do the first mile as well as the last mile with the city BRTS system, with the other transportation system. So there has to be a complementary kind of a story rather than just stand alone and looking at only one mode of transport.
Thank you. Very, very important element, many innovative solutions, but the importance of planning is quite there. I'm sure that I'm being told how much, I don't have much time. Yeah. Yeah. We'll do that, Sangeeta. There's a, yeah.
Look, I just had a quick point to add, which is, in our IFC infrastructure business, we actually had a relatively small cities financing operation.
Right.
I would say probably 3/4 of the projects that we financed were all related to clean transportation.
I see.
Either bus transit systems or some kind of a rail system, conversions to gas, and so on. The issue, of course, is which comes through, and you need smart solutions like what Mr. Nanda referred to, is the balance between the long-term capital need and the short-term capital availability is always a challenge. And also, cities develop, finance themselves in many cases through land sales. So hence, that leads to much more of a congestion format rather than a sprawl format. And hence, totally agree with with what everybody said, that the conviction in terms of long-term planning and then sticking to that sustainability path when we are focusing on new cities becomes almost the key factor, for those cities in the future.
Thanks. So anyway, you wanted to say,
I mean, drawing on what everybody said, and drawing on global experience, we see 3 kinds of transportation needs evolve. As Delhi is 10 cities close to each other, the first thing that you need is transport from one city, say Delhi to Gurgaon.
Right.
That's where metro makes great sense. Metro by itself makes huge amount of losses. It has to be subsidized. A private sector cannot subsidize it. It has to be government-based. And that's where Mr. Nanda's solution of creating the stations, or what Mr. Pandey said, creating the stations and integrating them into a system makes sense. The second is the 5, 6, 7 kilometers I have to travel to work.
Right.
This is very clearly amenable to things like bus rapid transport if you can do it early enough.
Right.
The point that you said about longer term needs and shorter term capital availability, the good thing about a bus rapid transit system is that it can grow. If you leave the space available, it can grow depending on wherever the need is. And the third is the last mile connectivity. You need to walk to your market. So the ability to have walkways or bicycle paths in the shortest distance. I think if you're able to get these 3 things right, you have a sustainable transport system which can grow as the city grows.
And the point is most of the time it's neglected, and suddenly trying to plan at the last minute does not work. We have one more topic, which is funding and financing, and Sujay started talking about that. The key thing is that cities require patient capital. Not much of it exists in India. You're the CEO of a newly created National Investment Fund. Is this going to create any patient capital? And do you see patient capital getting created in the country for city building?
It's critical, and we are just a piece of it, but we need a lot of support, clearly. But let me just take a minute to just introduce the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, because it's probably a new entity for many of you. So the NIIF is a new institution that has been anchored by the government. So the government is putting in basically the anchor capital. And then we are in the process of raising an additional amount of capital from institutional investors to create a large pool available for infrastructure equity investing in India. And we are progressing. So I've been in the job for about 4 months now. We've made good progress in trying to define the structure of what we want to do. And we are in the process right now of raising the capital from international institutional investors. So hopefully we'll be speaking to many of you about specific investments soon. Yeah. Now, having said that, in response to your question, I would revert to this, several people referred to it, the concept of competition, yeah, which of course in the capital space is also equally relevant. Just to give you a sense, so in India, different estimates show that we need about 500 billion to about $1 trillion equivalent of investment for the infrastructure sector in the next 5 years. OECD calculations for global infrastructure requirements is something in the range of $80 trillion. There is not that much capital. Yeah. So the capital that's available has plenty of opportunity to basically seek out. And hence, it comes back to the concept of differentiation and understanding what each investor wants, yeah, and being able to provide different kinds of investors with different risk appetites, the right product, with the right level of risk-return trade-off, with the right tenor, and so on and so forth. So in that space, clearly agree with you that, let me just add that clearly, I mean, as everybody is referring to, in building a new city, which is going through a phase of evolution, there are different kinds of capital that the city will tap into. I mean, there's the public capital, then there's multilateral capital, then there's strategic capital like what we are trying to put together. Finally, there's private capital, and finally there's capital markets. And literally the whole idea is the more the city gets independent in being able to access public markets, the rest of us are really trying to get the city to that point where it's sustaining. Now, clearly, we've identified, and it can be observed in what's happened in the Indian infrastructure investing space, that long-term patient capital is critical for us to develop infrastructure in a sustainable manner. Infrastructure is a cyclical business. There are issues that will come up with different, from different perspectives over time. So what we are trying to do actually is raise equity capital in our, in one of the NIF funds, which has at least a 15-year type of a horizon. Hopefully, we can get it closer to 20. And the idea is that when we invest not with the idea that we are going to have to exit 4 or 5 years down the road, but literally we are creating a more continuous cash flow, which will provide an yield to investors over time. Right. But that also means that we have to find ways for other kinds of capital to come and take the early, because a lot of the foreign institutional investors, the international investors, are actually looking for post-construction assets. So we have to come up smartly and design how we actually create those post-construction assets so that over time we create a virtuous circle where we are able to continuously build, put the assets in the hands of people who like that long, patient, yield-based return, and then build with that capital that we get out of, handing over those assets, build again. And that has to again play into the long-term development plan of the cities. Yeah, yeah.
No, so on behalf of the new city developers, I can tell you that at least our calculations say that new city development is one of the safest investment. What I mean by that is it's backed by land, which is ever increasing in value. The issue comes in cash flows, though. Okay, the cash flows are not necessarily predictable, but the investment is safe. So therefore, a 15-20% horizon.
And I have another point on that, which is, again, I think we were talking about the balance between short-term and long-term. Again, I think it becomes an issue for the city from a capital allocation standpoint of figuring out, do I sell the land now, or do I put in a little bit of money, raise the value of the land, then sell it, again put in a little. So this is really
all,
the trick.
all there, and there's a lot of virtuous cycle. I had many questions on that, but we are running out of time. I have one final question, but I won't ask that now, about the role of the government, because there's a lot of private sector energy here, whether the government is playing the role that is required. It was a question, but I will at this time maybe open it up to the audience for some interesting question. If we still have a minute at the end, maybe I will ask my final question. So I'd like to open it to the audience. Yeah, okay. Sorry. Please mention your name and a short question. Sorry, if you can just,
My name is Hari Hegde and I work for Wipro. In case you have space for some contrarian views, I have two comments to make. One, let me start with the gentleman who said metro needs to be prioritized, if he meant that. Here are some data points. I would sort of agree completely with what Mr. Nanda said. That was the smartest thing to do, and we are the beneficiaries. It's actually riding on the urban rail system and augmenting it through a train station. Very efficient. There is a serious discussion on this happening in Bangalore. We are looking at some existing urban rail systems to be augmented.
Right.
But he also talked of Curitiba. Curitiba is a great experiment in bus rapid transportation system. And data points say that bus rapid transportation system, purely from the economic efficiency, they are 16x the metro. So the question for us to ask is, should we in the Indian context prioritize BRTS? I'm not talking it's an either or.
Right.
What do you prioritize? That's one contrarian view. The second bit, Ajay, I'm a great believer in renewable energy, you know that. But putting solar on rooftop, beyond a point in a city, the effect of that has not yet been assessed, because what happens typically in a solar is about 20 to 30% gets converted into energy, rest gets converted into heat. A large spread of solar on rooftop could also create significant amount of heat islands in the cities. That is something that we need to be cognizant.
So you put two contrarian views, BRTS versus metro and solar on rooftops. Any quick comments on that? I'm converting your views into a question. Yeah, anything?
As with Hari, I always agree with him. Metro loses money on each passenger it moves. And therefore, unless it is connected to the larger system, where, in my view, it only makes sense if you're doing long distance transport. So Delhi to Gurgaon is the ideal, or Noida to Delhi is the ideal for a metro system. On the issue of heat, this is something that I continue to study, but the short point is that suppose the solar panel wasn't there. The amount of sunlight that would be hitting would be the same, and it would all be absorbed by the roof of the building. What the difference is in the two is something that I think, I'm not going to get technical, it's a matter of wavelengths and so on, but the difference between the two is what we need to study.
Okay. You want to?
Yeah, since metro we are talking about, Alstom is located in Sri City.
Yeah.
We make coaches for Chennai Metro, Cochin, Sydney and all. But we are not anywhere close to using metro in Sri City for next 10 to 15 years.
Right.
Because we don't need it, walk to work concept, these things. So new cities cannot afford economically these
metros.
metros.
What about BRTS?
BRTS also, see, there is again, it is all economics, because on one hand we are telling walk to work.
Walk to work, okay. So if you're saying walk to work is there, then
you put these facilities, you are defeating, you are contradicting yourself. Hence we said in the beginning we are going to have a lot of residential communities, people can walk to work. If there is a need, and also in the beginning when we are in a backward area, you need to have a lot of, you have to give the flexibility for the industry to bring their employees at their will.
Okay. Other questions? Yeah.
Actually, may I
Yeah.
take on the Hari's point? Totally agree with you that actually metro don't make money. There are not many metros that make money, I would say. I can only think of 3. The way metro system work is a function of density and is a function of how big is the city. All right, so of course you cannot plan that very clearly, but we hope that the governments would have a view when their cities are already growing, they should have made provision. Because exactly what you say, the capital cost is very high. So if we don't have to do the underground portion, actually most metros would have broke even. Why are there so many cities having to go underground? Actually, that is irrational. Going underground is irrational. It multiplies the cost by 4 times. All right. So we do need to plan ahead to have provisions for it to be above ground. And the next point is it has to integrate. And integration with bus systems, with other forms of surface transport systems is necessary. All right. And there lies another thought that city cores, should it be actually motorized? If it doesn't, if we at one day, if New York City or even Singapore, portions of it, can be demotorized, what will be the quality of life? And then we talk about the time spent on the systems, how much people travel on the roads.
Yeah.
Would be justification where the government has to step in to subsidize and make the systems available because it's for the greater good. Yeah.
Thank you. We have time for maybe 2 more questions. Yeah, please go ahead. Sorry, we need to. Yeah, there was a mic somewhere here. Yeah.
Hi, Shirish.
Yeah.
My name is Shailesh Pathak. I work in infrastructure and cities.
Yes.
To answer your question on what is the best mode of public transit for a new city, it's obviously walking and cycling.
Right.
And as Mr. Sena Reddy said, you can't afford high cost. And Sri City is a great example, where you bring in the jobs first, and then you start developing the affordable housing. We've spoken about that.
Right.
And the other point was, AIIB is getting metro projects from existing cities. It's not getting it from new cities, right? But on Sujay's point, I strongly believe that there's no international dollar that's going to come into India for primary financing of infrastructure. It is patient capital, and therefore it is happier with lower returns. And lower returns come when the risk is lower. So this financing
after getting built,
the financing of new cities is akin to financing of new infrastructure. Why would I, sitting in Canada, finance construction of new cities or construction of new infrastructure? And probably this is what Amitabh Kant realized when he was developing DMIC's concepts.
Yeah.
And any new city is going to take at least 20 to 30 years to really come to scale.
Yeah.
Just want to add on the financing of new cities, since that is one of the points you said you will talk.
Yeah.
There is no money for new cities. I think we have to be clear that you said patient capital. It is a feel-good capital in my view, because when there was a euphoria in India, I'm talking of Lehman Brothers 2008, our investors didn't know what is involved. We didn't know what is involved. We invested our capital, they invested. Today, when we didn't have land, we didn't have customers, we were able to raise private equity. Today we have everything. I don't think we get even 100 rupees into the capital, because it may be guaranteed, but returns are very, very long term. And it is not...
so you don't believe external funding?
I tell people, I don't, not in our lifetime we'll see the money.
I don't know if this was a 5-minute mark or the final mark. I'm taking it 5 minutes to go mark. Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah.
I'll just add to that, and I basically fundamentally agree with both the points. But there's one opportunity I think that we have today, which is when investors look at the global scenario from a macro standpoint, India is shining bright. And it is clear that if we continue on a path of 7-8% growth, hopefully it continues to increase, we are going to become a major player. We are already a major player in many sectors, but we're going to become a major player in every sector almost. And investors will want to have allocation, and this is what we have some colleagues here from the Canadian pension funds, for example, they always look at the allocation of the assets,
Yeah.
and the allocation of the assets to India will have to increase. Now, having said that, I mean, this is the whole concept of finding, the right, the right fit for the right person.
Right.
And if we do things right, and instead of maybe having a very long phase one development of a city, phase it in put it in shorter phases and use the early phases to literally bring more predictability to the city in terms of infrastructure, in terms of regulation. I think several of you have been doing that. Then I think we can speed up that patient capital coming in. But I think we have to be realistic about the scale and the availability of that kind of finance for a greenfield project. Those investors want to invest in scale, clearly. But they also want to invest with predictability. And I agree with you that they're looking for, not for the high returns, they're looking for fair returns with managed risk. This is the key.
This is the key. Okay, I already got my sign from the back that there are only a couple of minutes to go. So
Can I add to that point?
Okay,
I feel
but
obliged to add.
1 minute.
Look, I think I totally agree with you, but I would like to inject some optimism in this, all right? If you look at the success, just now I mentioned about Suzhou Industrial Park, Bintan and Batam in Indonesia, these are wonderful examples of cities making money after the 10th year, all right? So this has the other aspect of the optimism. Yes, it is a patient capital, but you look at it, it gives you time to structure your capital structure. You can raise bonds, you can let go some of your equity and allow other people to participate. You can form funds and so on and so forth. And you can even have vehicles in the stock market like investment trusts that you exit to. So if you are utilizing all those vehicles, actually one development, you can earn a few rounds of money. All right, so it's about structuring.
So Mr. Pang, as soon as you said that, a few eyebrows went up with, I think, hope and optimism. There are some people in the 10th year of their... 7th year, exactly. So there are cities which are turned positive in the 7th year. There are cities which are turning positive in the 10th year. So you're absolutely right, but even a 10-year, I call it a patient capital. Guys, gentlemen, ladies, we sort of covered many topics today, okay? The main theme was how do you build cities for the future, and there were a number of points related to sustainability, livability, job creation, transportation, financing. It's really the careful application of all these elements together. I consider city building to be one of the most difficult enterprise because it's chaotic. It's a little bit unpredictable because it is based on the surroundings. Same way I call the job of a mayor to be the toughest job of CEO job in the world. Similarly, I consider city building to be one of the toughest activities. Having said that, the force of urbanization, especially in India, I hope that we can all get together 10 years down the road and have some 25 fantastic cities to look at and many more examples like what Mr. Nanda mentioned on many best practices and many practices that will all come together. And as McKinsey and Company and as well as Confluence, we are committed to just following up on this whole journey of new cities in India, the best practices, how this will all come together. So therefore, I would like to thank the panelists really for sharing your experiences and all of you for patiently listening to us and also putting some controversial as well as a different point of view. So thank you again. Let's give a big hand to the panelists.
I would request the panelists to remain seated for a few more minutes. There are a couple of questions that have come from our social media followers. The first one is for... yeah, just a couple of questions. So. The first one is from Mr. Ajay Mathur. What are the latest trends in energy efficiency that you foresee gaining traction?
The one that is most important is air conditioning. This is the largest driver for demand in energy, and therefore storage of air conditioning is important. More efficient air conditioners are important, and demand response measures so that you can jack up the set point of air conditioners when the electricity becomes very expensive. Those are the kinds of things which are absolutely at the top of the agenda as far as energy is concerned.
Thank you. And the second one is for Mr. Ajay Pandey. How can infrastructure planning improve the urban experience for citizens? How can infrastructure planning improve the urban experience for citizens?
Well, I guess I think this comment was made earlier. You have to integrate the views and, points from the citizens, and depending on and that's why I made a point about saying that you have to figure out what is going to be the identity of your city, and hence you begin to structure your story, whether it's infrastructure, whether it is the life creation, whether it is events, whichever way you want to call it, skill development, in and around a particular thought and ecosystem, which is done better in terms of participation of the existing, residents, and of course the future residents. So there has to be a little bit of a handshaking that has to go on.
Thank you. And more people will be moving to the cities in the next 40 years than in the entire span of human history. Building brand new cities as a response to this unprecedented urban boom is perhaps the boldest reaction so far. These urban utopias not only represent hundreds of billions of dollars of investments, millions of potential employment opportunities, but also break ground for innovation and technology to bring intrinsic to urban lifestyles. Every choice new city builders make can either become a cutting-edge innovation or a source of future conflict. Despite common challenges, each city is unique, like we heard from all of you, and needs to adjust priorities and set targets according to its own local context. If city science teaches us anything, it's that no two cities are the same. So, new city builders have a blank sheet and centuries worth of natural urban experiments to help shape tomorrow. Some new cities will succeed while others may stumble. I think you were talking about a success rate of 30%. We hope that the ideas presented here will provide insights and help new city builders define their priorities to achieve their bold vision. I now call upon Ms. Sangeeta Prasad, Chief Executive Officer, Integrated Cities and Industrial Clusters Business, Mahindra Lifespace Developers Limited, to present mementos as a token of appreciation to our distinguished panelists. Sangeeta. Contemporary new city projects can be urban laboratories for testing new business models, technologies, and lifestyles of the future. Ambitious and visionary, they face multitude of challenges. Sustainability implies an integrated networking of human settlements right from a hamlet to a metropolis. Cities are not just beautiful spaces, it's the way cities enable individuals to interact and intertwine that breathes life into a city. Therefore, the soft issues, which are the social and cultural, are even more important than the hard ones of physical infrastructure. A city expresses its soul through social activities, through arts, through creating a sense of belonging and pride. It's my privilege to invite our next speaker, Mr. Shomit Sengupta, artist, founder, and creative strategist, Shining Consulting Private Limited. Mr. Shomit is an acclaimed international consultant to top management on strategic design with uncommon customer-centric for diverse industries. Deploying art in his creative business strategy, he has worked in over 2,500 projects for hundreds of global corporations across 5 continents. Mr. Shomit founded his company Shining Consulting in Paris in 1984, and his international clientele include Danone, Nestle, Reckitt Benckiser, Remy Martin, among others, and Indian clients include Wipro, Britannia, Mahindra and Mahindra Nagas. Mr. Shomit calls his installation art disorder because he finds heterogeneous India's beauty to be in physical disorder but embedded with human sensitivity. The disorder installation uniquely invites viewers to unscramble the artwork, making his art non-static and viewer interactive. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Shomit Sengupta.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Arun, to invite me, and Sangeeta. And can I ask you one question? What is this? No answer. No? We have all talked on the top of the infrastructure. We have not talked about what is the hidden element under the all infrastructure. So, next slide I show you, and it was started in 14th century. It is the sewage of Paris. It's a very famous sewage, and whole Paris city. I'll be talking Paris because I grew up there, and I will give you some, my understanding and what happened with the building infrastructure and the city plan. So this is and very often when my friends come to France, I take them. There is a place called Égout de Paris. You can visit the whole, the sewage in Paris. It's lots of intellectual goes there to spend their time for thinking. It's one kind of thinking place, but it is a sewage. Now this is a gentleman, the provost, who was started in 1370, and it is very funny, how they used to clean the sewage. They used to have a huge, big size, round shape one stone, and with the huge water, they used to pass inside and to clean the sewage. Now, you see, this is the most famous road in the Paris, Champs-Élysées, Arc de Triomphe. Could you imagine? There are 12 roads, and when you are driving there, you have to really understand how from here you will go there, and you have to cross so many roads. And it is one of the biggest junction called Place de l'Étoile, and then this is the 70. Now this place, this style, where you see that this shape on this style of design, it took only 17 years. I will tell you who did it, and he was not an architect, and he was a prefect. And then see this is one of the beautiful, the landscape which you find in the left side of Paris, in the west of Paris, called Bois de Boulogne. And here, the same thing, that for Central Park, it's in the 8 times they came to study this, this landscape to make the Central Park. Then, this is the diagonal in Paris. One of the most famous thing happened, and lot of different countries they have taken it from there. Now you have the Chicago diagonal influenced by Paris. So boulevard, square, and parks. If you look at, then all these countries they have taken very serious attention from there, inspired from there to build up their places. That when we talk about the boulevard, just imagine in 19th century, and this kind of boulevard, it was really not conceivable, and it was not easy matter. It was a huge controversial thing because lots of the disease and everything were in Paris, and poor people had to leave Paris. Anyhow, that city has been designed, and this is the boulevard, the creation of boulevard. Then you have the square. Then you have that the beautiful park. Okay, this is Paris. Now, this is the man. The Eugene Haussmann. When you go to Paris, you will find lots of roads and everything by Haussmann. And this man, one of the things I studied a lot. When I was a student of École des Beaux-Arts of Paris, in the first initial year, we have to do the architecture also. Then his theory was that when you are making a city plan, you never look at the city from the ground. You have to create one space to go top, and from top you direct how you build up the city. That was one of the biggest things, and I have discovered from whole his idea, and it took him only 17 years. And the way he has built up, any rational factor, beauty, or any kind of future development, and when in this kind of Haussmann building you put one lift, you can easily put a lift by reducing little bit the staircase, and lots of adaptability of the future was very, very strong. Now, just see, I show you that after the century, more than a century, then when you put a modern building like this as a cultural center, which is the cultural center of Georges Pompidou, see this building if you take in Dubai or New York, it will not have this charm. It has this Haussmannian architecture, and it has a totally different appearance here. So just imagine, this was the contemporary Paris, created in 1976, and this is the old Haussmann Paris. So you can see that how that one kind of consistency and coherency is there. Even this place, when you put something extremely contemporary, modern, and it creates a different type of image, it can a different type of vibration in a city. Now, I will come to a more recent stage. This is an incredible gentleman. I know him personally. I think no monarch in France they could have done what Jacques Lang has done for not only for France, there are lots of things in the world. He was one of the most brilliant cultural and education minister, and from whole Mitterrand time, he was a cultural minister. He really, really transformed whole Paris. I just show you. See, Pyramid of Louvre, it was such a concept, where nowhere in the world you have any museum which has the collection less than 200 years, you cannot put the painting. Even Picasso's painting cannot go there. And making some a totally different architecture. And what are the advantage created, this is a building and you can really go inside. And inside there are lots of gallery and lots of, the shops and everything created. One thing I will share with you, even Picasso didn't have the chance to have any exhibition in this place. Just listen to me what I'm saying. Just imagine me coming from India, one Indian artist. I got the chance to have exhibition inside the Louvre 2 years back. I was invited. See, I show you the place here. This was my painting inside the Louvre. Just imagine this man's whole idea was how to create something for the art where the whole masses can come to there. Now, another thing, you have the Bibliothèque Nationale, the National Library, which is very old-fashioned, very nicely designed. But he has created, when he has commissioned, this is the National Library. Just look at the 4 books here and the east of Paris. Now, this is another opera. When you go to Place de l'Opéra, you have the Opera Garnier, which is the old architecture, and now he has created Opera Bastille. And just imagine the idea of the location. Bastille is the most significant location of the fall of Bastille and all, which was totally demolished, and he made his opera house in front of that. Now, this is another incredible thing. It was his office, cultural minister office on the top, and in this place, what he has done, he has invited one artist, his name is Mr. Bourrin, and to create some kind of installation art. And what he did, that with this kind of column, with the white and black, and this is the whole art, and it has become a huge point of interest. And nobody used to go before to see the cultural minister, the lobby or in this place. And this is just before opera, you will find it. And now, this is another thing, what I can tell you. You see, you have the politics, different opinion, public opinion, but consistency, 181 years of consistency, I will show you. What interesting thing. This was created, our first arc, Napoleon military victory in 1808. The second one, what you see in the Champs-Élysées, and this was at the 1836 for the, the French Revolutionary and Napoleon War. Now, that this gentleman, Jacques Lang, with François Mitterrand, they have commissioned, and but just outside of Paris, La Défense, the humanitarian ideas, this monument. Now, just look at interesting part. After that, the whole La Défense development happened over there. But what is interesting, see, this is the whole route from here, 1808 to here 1836, and here 1989. Now, journey of 181 years, 9.8 kilometers, one straight line. You see, the symbol of the victory is such an interesting thing. This is called the coherency of the whole architectural plan. 181 years, just imagine. That's why today, and so many people has talked about, even Victor Hugo was not agreeing with what he was doing. That I don't know if you read about his book, Les Miserables. Miserables happened at that time when Haussmann was breaking whole Paris. Just look at the biggest tourist today, 90 million comes there for Paris, what kind of capital they have created. Now, some other thing also he has created, that in 21st June, from 1981, he declared it will be the musical day, and everybody on the street, and India also has started. And among that, there are lots of things he has created, this gentleman. Now, what I can tell you, that so, according to me, there is the expertise and design. So, in the expertise, visionary concept with adaptability, then, high artistic sense with functional city plan. Everything was functional because it's still working today with the adaptability. The shock of the new, the world has seen totally a different city. Hitler was ready to destroy Paris city. Only for the 4 hours, the man who was protecting Paris from his side, he did everything while being German. he disturbed Hitler, who should not destroy Paris. He went German, Nazi, he helped the French people, but he was killed later that Paris should not be destroyed. Extreme coherence in grandeur, mark of reference, blend of classic contemporary wave, then value increase with age. And this is the thing all leading to a city that lasts, Now, what is the inherent identity of India? Now, I left India when I was 19 years old. I'm coming from a slum-type refugee colony because I didn't have any very big idea about India. I left with $8, but I grew up in France. So when I come back, what I can see, one of the biggest things which really marks me, the inclusiveness of this country. You see, this picture I'm not showing it for any insult, I'm showing, we don't fight, we don't revolt for that. This is the inclusiveness of our country, and that's a big, big thing, our Indian heritage we have. Then second thing, the abundance of color. Abundance of color, what you see in India, in the Western world, I grew there, but it is highly doctrinated, the colors. Every season, people declare what colors should come, and everybody wear like this. But in India, when you walk down on the street, you don't see often the two women wearing the same color of sari. This is another value. And another thing, which was very, very interesting for me, I call it désordre in French. I tell you why. Because in English, disorder is a mental and physical, both disorder. But in French, désordre, the pronunciation is désordre, it's only object disorder, not mental. So I have taken this three element as a very significant identity of India. And, from Daso, people came to meet with me. I told them, these three things if you don't like in India, then you will not love India. You have to love desert. You have to love, the kind of inclusiveness, because the West is not inclusive society. And you have to understand what is the value of that. If you don't like it, you will insult it. But if you understand that, you love it, then you understand what is India. Now, in my journey, I'm an artist painter, basically. How I have taken it, I will just show you very quickly. You see, I have created a painting style. Could you open this one, please? Could you open this one? I have created a painting style, and Sangeeta asked me to bring its style to show, which I call désordre. That means it's the first time in the world, and I have presented this type of painting in the Louvre Museum, that visitors can come and they can fix the thing totally the way they want. So, can you open it, please? See, Vinny, could you come? Oliver, please come here. Come. I'll show you how my system can be used by different people. I can show you. One idea here is this. One idea is here. I can move the disorder. I can create different type of painting. It is movable. Everything 360 degree I can move. That means in your house, you have one day like this, and you can change. All the time you can change. And this is the whole disorder of India, what I bought in my painting. And now, I will invite some people, some friends, they will come, and they will put in order. Then you will see one olive tree will be there, and it is in Sardinia, the old history of the, this is a one, the symmetry is a 5th century before BC. And how all these things go together, and one young man sitting there with a Nike shoe, and this will come. Could you please start, everyone? And they have to put the glass. I will continue my show, and you will see, and this is the whole idea of the disorder. That means I can put the disorder, but the disorder will find also the order. Why I am coming this way, then I don't find in your architecture plan, whatever you said, I totally agree, everything I have heard, but I don't see that you reflect in your architecture plan this Indianity, which I will be reinforcing now. This is my inclusiveness. This is the building, what you see. This is the first church, Armenian church in Calcutta in the 14th century. And today, in front of this church, they have given the space for the plastic bazaar. Then that is a mixture of the current situation and what used to be. This is my whole character of the inclusiveness. And the third, abundance of color. Renault invited me to paint a car, their Quid, and I painted the car, the whole history of Bengal with the French Bengal and the Victorian Bengal I have recounted, and this car is traveling throughout the world now for different exhibition. Thanks to Arun who came to see my exhibition in December and with the inauguration of this car. Not only that, in Bombay, when I was having this exhibition, and it was the idea of to put the car outside of the exhibition gallery, thanks to Arun that he did everything for me that I could put my car outside of. That I'll tell later. Okay, so now, what is the outlook of a billion plus Indians? So you see, here you have the representation of 85% India. Their showroom is not the same, and there is a representative of 15% Indian. You see, the contrast is very, very high. And nowhere you will find in the new construction, new things, we take anything from here. We are abandoning completely this side. This has got a beautiful, very terrific charm this side. This is the real India. How do you take it in a different way, put it in a more modern form and more artistic way? That is a different job. But this is the whole idea. Then, see, this is the idea, you know, this heterogeneity, you do not have anywhere in the world. Nowhere in the world so many people, different type of language, religion, food, everything different, but we all live together. That is the biggest heterogeneity of this country. Okay. Now, then India's new city layout are Western model Cartesian. You know, Cartesian, I don't know if you have heard about it, in René Descartes, he is defined in the French guy, 1596 to 1650, emphasized on the logical expression of the mathematical science, everything. So in the Western world, after that, everything is thought in a very Cartesian way. But Indian or new cities are getting too much Cartesian, which doesn't have any connection with the real value of India, according to me. Now, if you say, when you see this, I'm not criticizing anybody, but when you see that, and that could be anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world you go, you can find it. But where is the real value of our Indian, this inclusiveness, the color, and you know, where you find this kind of element. So now, just last week, I had some French friends came. We were traveling to see Bangalore here and there, and suddenly they stopped me the car. They said, "Let's go there." They have seen the, you know, this kind of slum. They have seen this, you know, the how do you call how do you call it, panel, solar panel here. And now I went there. I discussed with them. You know, this guy is saying he's getting 8,000 rupees per month, but he cleaned this house. But he's not allowed to stay there, but he stays here. And this is the lack of inclusiveness, and where you're not giving attention. And then what happens? Then you create, I have heard in your discussion also, you create one kind of desert, completely a separate universe from the real India and the new modern India. Okay, now if you go to any kind of layout, the same, and it is looking totally in America, it's not in India. Now, inclusiveness, abundance of color, desert, these are the represent India, where you will find. So another point, before I come to my conclusion, another point I want to make, that, you know, this is the one very important thing, this is a cloud mentality, that buying than sharing. You know, and buying than sharing in all these YouTube, you don't buy the CD, then, you know, sharing the card, then, you know, you don't have the album, it is available in the net. Now, as a painter designer, here I take out what India needs, you see. The expertise, whatever I showed you, they are all expertise. And according to me, expertise comes from the intelligence. So when you are 25 years old, if you do not have 15 years advance your intelligence, then you cannot get the skill. Skill is very important. And the second is the design with exceptional artistic and environmental sense. Now, this is another factor, you know, what I have seen, that Western society is a million country, and our country is a billion country, heterogeneous billion society. And when you superimpose the million countries idea in India, it can never work, because we are the billion society with a totally different mentality, and we superimpose always on the million people this Cartesian thing in our country. So the India, by doing that all, I think India lacks the expertise in lots of domains. So expertise in city plan, what I am saying, expertise, experience with ahead of time intelligence, then you have the expertise, then you treat the physical treatment and the psychological treatment. Why you need the physical treatment? Treatment is good. The doctor always gives the treatment to cure the patient, and when you are doing that, you should be always careful that what value it bringing to the society. That's why I'm talking about the treatment. And then, so Human need, you have the stated and unstated. And last 200 years, we have used all these things to destroy the planet. But respecting the green environment, it's a very important. I don't know why it has not started 200 years back. So artistic design integrated usability with scope of adaptability, because each time, every decade goes, the usability might change. And the digital world, everything will change. And with this, the product with physical treatment and product, what I'm saying product, even the architecture, everything is a part of the product, and the psychological treatment. These two things balance is the artistic design. One is the artistic design and the expertise. Now, what is my final direction I'm saying? Beauty of inclusiveness desert. So, high blend of social inclusiveness is expertise. Now, desert architectural view with non-conformist color. India is a non-conformist color. There is no dogma on the color. I have learned the color composition in a totally different way in the Western society. But when I take my painting with the Indian color I put in the Western society, they can imagine. They tell me in my last exhibition, say, that we don't have this kind of weather where I can see the colors. These are a topic. It has got a huge. The value of our country in this area is so huge. I will be exploring from here to another 10, 15 years to take all these elements to the world. Ability to regular change like my art. What art I am doing, and there should be, every day that you are having one system of your window on the north. Why not moving the whole building one place, that one portion of the flat can be totally turned? And why you need a one system? We are doing something totally new. Don't create something where the whole world will come and have a look. Man-material ergonomic blend of usability. Now, how do you create the human relationship with your motor, beak and motor, and all these industrial things? These are all part of expertise. And intemporal artistic beauty of scope adaptability. What I showed you, the Osman character, and still today, it is the most costliest. And one thing, more you can do that, nothing in the world exists which valuation higher than a painting. Nothing exists. I give you one example. Modigliani painting, 1925, when you paint, how much it cost? Maximum 3,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees. Last year, 2015, how much is it? It was sold in the auction in New York? $174 million. Who bought it? Chinese bought it. So, more you create this value. That's when Osman architecture today, whatever you create modern, and prices are extremely high in Paris. And you will not have a modern facilities in the Osman house like today's house. The natural calamity proof, well, this is the very rational we cannot avoid, and dreamy switch. This is one of the things, what you do on the top, and if the bottom is not perfect, and it will not last. So switch is another really, really very important, and I am talking about making the switch like a museum, where people can go, they can visit. And more people can visit this kind of place, then they will not spit on the road. They will understand, to control the speed, they have created the switch. The switch is a very, very important aspect. The friendly, elegant technology. Well, okay. So this is my whole presentation, and thank you.
Thank you, sir. Your examples about our country was very interesting and really made me think. India today is a very organic and conscious mess. Everything seems to be wrong, but everything manages to happen. We are not a manicured garden, we are like a forest. It's because of this organic nature of our existence that invaders who came in waves through the last millennium did not know how to deal with us. They could not figure out what they could destroy in us to destroy our identity, because it is not any one thing, it is too complex. This complexity is the most fantastic thing that humanity has created, because it breeds a completely different dimension of humanity. It is just that we have to master it to produce results. People who think in a structured manner cannot understand the possibility of the chaos. One who is a product of a manicured garden would think the forest is chaotic. A garden needs constant tending. If you do not tend it for a few months, it's gone. But a forest has been there for millions of years, and it will continue to be there. This is the strength of complexity that one nurtures around them. Thank you, sir, for your wonderful presentation. I now request Mr. Arun Nanda, Chairman, Mahindra Lifespace Developers Limited and Mahindra Holidays and Resorts India Limited, to hand over a token of our appreciation to Mr. Shomit Sengupta. It's our pleasure and privilege to have our chairman, Mr. Anand Mahindra, here today. Welcome you to our Confluence. Advances in information technology, information and communication technology are radically changing the way we live and manage cities. New cities are an ideal ground for experimenting with new technologies to empower people and foster the much sought after identity that defines successful cities. New cities have the opportunity to imagine user-friendly services that facilitate the development of an identity and a sense of community. The ICT revolution succeeded in spurring online content creation and sharing. However, the analog parts of the world still lag behind. What happens when technology jumps out of the computer screen and becomes part of the things that we wear, the roads we drive on, the cities we inhabit? It's my privilege to invite our second speaker, Mr. Eitan Schwartz, CEO of Tel Aviv Global, a municipal initiative aimed at positioning Tel Aviv as a global city. Tel Aviv is today one of the world's leading ecosystems for technological startups and enjoys the highest rate of startups per capita or per square mile outside of Silicon Valley. The task of Mr. Schwartz and his team is to elevate the city's global standing and leverage its brand name to promote international economic development, international visitors, and international media exposure. Over to Mr. Eitan Schwartz.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Eitan Schwartz. I just traveled 4,000 kilometers to come here, and I want to thank you for inviting me. I'm very humbled. I was asked to speak about inspirational ideas. I've been here for one day. Your city and your country is extremely inspirational, so with all modesty, what you have here at home is the biggest inspiration I've ever seen. And the second thing I'd like to say is I was asked to speak about Tel Aviv as a smart city, and also being humble. Tel Aviv is not a smart city. Tel Aviv is as stupid as any other city. There are some smart practices we have, and one of them in particular sparked some interest in the world about 2 years ago when in the Smart City Conference in Barcelona, our city won the first prize. So I want to introduce this product, and we'll talk a bit about it because really it's where technology meets human behavior, and we're very proud of what we achieved. So I'll start with a short video. This is a product called Digital Tel Aviv. Please.
Welcome to Tel Aviv, Israel's energetic and youthful heartbeat. A coastal metropolitan that never sleeps. A city deserving of the next step in municipal services and communication. Digital. A personalized interest. Digital. A new kind of urban experience.
I want to start talking to you and tell you a bit about the city of Tel Aviv, which I come from. I'll tell you a bit about Tel Aviv as a smart city, and then a bit about our future. I love starting with history. This is what the city looked like about 107 years ago. Tel Aviv was founded in 1909. We'll discuss the startup culture in the city, but we like to think of the city as the first startup in the city itself. It was founded by 66 dreamers that bought a plot of sand dunes very close to the Mediterranean shore, and they had a dream of founding a modern metropolis in the heart of a place that had no running water and had no electricity. And today, in 2017, this is what the exact spot that they stood at looks today. This is the financial center of Israel, the cultural center of Israel, the heart of the city of Tel Aviv. As was mentioned in the introduction, one of the most important engines of our economy is the fact that we are a very, very technological hub. Israel is known as the startup nation. You might have heard that term, the startup nation. There's a lot of technology in Israel, and as it happens in many countries, technology begins in the major city. So we enjoy a proliferation of startup companies, probably the highest per capita in the world. The mayor of Tel Aviv is always asked why this city has managed to attract so many startup companies. What do we do to attract technological people? So the answer is we don't do anything to attract technological people. What we try to do is create the most fun city that we can, and creative people follow. So we are known as the Mediterranean capital of cool by the New York Times. We have a very high number of bars and pubs that unfortunately at my age and marital status I don't enjoy, but many residents do. Israelis in general are known as very daring. We're a very equal society. We don't have barriers between people. We're not afraid to approach other people. We're not afraid to speak to people. What is known in Hebrew as chutzpah, we are very, very blunt, and we speak directly with people. That's very good for a startup culture. We're a very young city. For a Western city, the number of young people is very, very high, probably the youngest city in the European sphere. 1/3 of our residents are between the ages of 18 and 35, and this is thanks to a series of policies that attracts young people to the city, and it's a very vibrant one. Now, Professor Richard Florida, if you know him, who's an urbanist, he spoke about the 3 T's that attract creative people to cities. One is technology. So we have technology in Israel, and it's concentrated in cities. So it's concentrated in Tel Aviv. The second T is talent. A lot of talented people in the city, but most importantly, how do we create platforms to allow talented people to be creative? How do we make it more accessible for them to be creative? How do we allow this one guy who came to City Hall and says, you have just installed a multi-million-dollar escalator system, and it resembles a cartoon to me, and I would like to paint paintings on it so that when the escalators go up, you'll see animation. What do you do with a young, crazy artist like that? It took the municipality weeks to approve it. Finally, we approved it. We said we're going to take it down after a month. It's been there for 5 years. People come to the municipality just to see this. And it's an example of being able to listen to artists in the city and allow them to create when they want to create and use the municipal platforms, which, by the way, they own because it's their tax-paying money that's paying for it, right? The third T, which is very, very important, is tolerance. And tolerance in the region I come from, in the Middle East, is not a very, very clear-cut thing. The fact that you allow every type of person to express themselves, that you allow minorities to feel part of the city, that you allow every part of the society to feel at home is something which, unfortunately, in the Middle East is not necessarily synonymous with everyday life, and this is something that the city of Tel Aviv values very much. It's home to every minority in Israel, and we hope that everybody feels at home. So talent, technology, tolerance, those are the 3 T's for a creative city. Now let's talk about why the city has some smart practices, and we just showed you probably the most important one. About a decade ago, the city began writing a strategic plan. It was the first time the city said, okay, what's our vision? One of the people in the former panel spoke about a vision. What is the vision? First, let's decide what we want in the future of this city, and then we'll create policies to implement. So there were 4 pillars. One was that we would be an economic and cultural center, a city for all residents, a citizen-oriented governance, and an attractive urban environment. That pretty much covers it all. But that sets a set of guidelines for the city planners and for city policymakers, kind of like the torch that we all follow. So we developed a whole lot of smart practices as a result. If you look at the policies that fit these 4 pillars, you see a lot of stuff that at the end of the day were created to be more efficient, to give better services to our residents for a lower price. In many cases, we have typical smart city projects. I know in India you are talking a lot about smart cities today. I can't say that we excel on most things. We're pretty much like a lot of other cities in some things, and some other things we fall behind. We are pretty good at the things, like always, where you have to be perfect. One is readiness. As you know, in our region, we have to be ready for all kinds of violence, unfortunately, be it terrorism or war. So our control room is a pretty sophisticated one, and it uses pretty sophisticated analytics to kind of like analyze what's going on in the city. And a lot of people come from all around the world to learn from our systems, and we're pretty proud of that. Another thing we're pretty good at, and again because of necessity, is our smart irrigation. We have very little water in Israel, and we're very proud of the fact that every year we have more and more green space in the city of Tel Aviv, yet we use less and less water every year. So we managed to perfect the usage of water really to every last drop, and this is something that we just had to do because we don't have enough water. But when you think about it, and this is the breakthrough, you can buy technology and you can install irrigation, but what every city is unique about is what it knows about its own residents, what it knows about its people. And this is where we get to the main point of my discussion, which is how do you create civic engagement platforms through technology? This, for us, is the practice that we are most proud of. So let's go back a stop. There are 3 ways of looking at how we can create smart practices in a municipality. The first basic level is the government to government, and I'll explain. And then you go from government to citizens, and the utopian model that we hope one day to reach is creating platforms, smart platforms, that citizens relate to citizens without no interference from the government. But let's talk about government to government. This is an example of the silos that we have in the municipality. Many municipalities have these silos. You have the people in the parking department, They plan the parking system, they plan the signs, they install the signs, they regulate the parking. Take a look to the right-hand side. You have public health, you have welfare, you have culture, you have business. All of these people are doing their daily tasks. Does any person in one silo know what the other person in another silo is doing? In most cases, they probably don't know what their own colleagues are doing. How do you create a culture when everybody can know what's going on within the government? Let's talk about government officials to begin with. How do we know what our colleagues are doing? Do we need to know everything? How do we select the information? This is what we call knowledge management, and we started it about a decade ago. Again, this was not thinking about smart city practices. This was just thinking about how to better manage the city. So the key for this is sharing. How do you get people to share their information? How do you get people to realize that sharing their information is an asset, that they're not giving up something by handing over their information, they were empowering themselves and, of course, empowering their colleagues by doing so. So we came up with a set of tools. Municipal procedures, let's write them down. Work plans, let's all write our work plans in the same format. Guidelines for how to give services, let's all write those down. And we'll empower our municipal workers on the way. Remember these faces, I'll get back to them later. So this is what we document. Look on the left-hand side. This is pretty obvious, right? The municipal committees meeting, when city council meets, we write it down. We put it online. Municipal procedures, municipal forms. That's pretty obvious. Take a look on the right-hand side. Tips of employees, new ideas of workers. We start writing down everything in basic formats, and we create a body of work which we then make public. We have 2,200 call scripts for people that call in to receive service from the municipality. That's a lot of work. And it took us a decade to get the employees to understand that this is not just creating more paperwork. At the end of the day, we'll make their job better and easier. The next stage was to set up dozens of internal portals. Each department in the city has its own internal portal where all these documents are available. So for instance, when I come back home from this trip to India, I will file a report. Where I spent my time, who I met with, what I did during each meeting. This will become part of this portal of our international relations division. Everybody in the city can read what I did here during my 3 days in India. I'm sharing my information, so that does two things. First of all, I make sure that I'm working and not having a good time. Well, I did have a good time at the Taj Mahal yesterday, but that was at my own spare time. I'm not just here in India to have a good time. I'm here to do work. I know that people will be reading what I did. And the second thing is, this creates a body of knowledge that everybody in the municipality can tap into. So we covered 8,000 employees, and we created an amazing body of work, and everybody knows what everybody else is doing, and we thought that we solved the problem. We came up with a wonderful municipality that was very, very effective, and Tel Aviv became greener and cleaner and more effective in how it runs its business. And then what happened? One of the things the city does all the time is monitor its own work. We do surveys, we do focus groups. So 2010, 2011, there was a groundbreaking focus group that the management all got to see from the other side of the one-sided glass. Here's what it turns out. Tel Avivians love the city and hate City Hall. They love the city, but they hate the bureaucrats that are running the city. Everything that's good in the city is thanks to the residents. Everything that's bad, it's our fault, right? So when there's congestion, it's because we're running the lights poorly, but when it flows, they've had luck. And when the day's clear, it's from God, but when it's polluted, it's our fault. And when the teacher's great, the teacher's great, but when she's not great, the city doesn't know how to select its teachers. So we found that our residents love living in the city, but they don't associate what happens in the city to the people that run the city. So all this information we gathered, we start making it transparent. We create online services like many other cities. And then we realize we have to go to the next phase of government to citizens. We have to give the citizens information of things that concern them, because even though the information is all on the municipal site, they're not accessing it. They have no way of going through thousands and thousands of pages to know what's going on in the city, right? In every important moment of our citizens' lives, we are there. We're there when they're born. We're there when they get their first baby care. We're there when they go to kindergarten, when they go to school, and so on and so forth. We're there in every junction, and we know a lot about our citizens. So how do we create a system that integrates everything we know about the city and everything we know about our citizens? How do we bring those two together? How do we go from being reactive to proactive to intelligently active? If you come to us and ask for a form, we'll give you that form. That's reactive. How do we make that proactive? We put it on the website. How do we make it intelligently active? How do we make sure that you only get the form you need and you're not bothered with anything else? So that's what we just showed in that short video, and I'll try to explain it very, very simply. It's a service, a digital service, that gives you personalized city information, benefits, and e-services. E-services, that's pretty obvious. It's the link between information and benefits. What we say to our citizens is as follows. You give us information about yourselves, we in return will give you benefits and the information that you need to know from City Hall. For an example, I didn't time this, I swear to God. About 2 hours ago, I received a text message that I can buy cheap tickets for a theatrical production for about $10 instead of $50. That is because they know where I live and they know I love theater, because I gave them that information. I get an email when my kid has to register for kindergarten, when there's a roundtable discussing city policy. Even when we budget community projects, we give the residents the possibility, if they want to take part in the budgeting process. We give them benefits, like free entries to swimming pools and all kinds of other stuff. And there's a personal area. So at the end of the day, with multiple channels of communication, we tell our residents what we know that they want to know. We don't bother them with anything else that they don't want to know. And they feel very special because they're getting treatment from the municipality on things that are of concern to them. If somebody's not of an elder age, they don't care about what we're doing in that field. They care about what's happening with the kids, and vice versa. All kinds of unexpected services, like very cheap chairs on the beach, which is something that people are concerned about. We've gone to sharing public resources. If the community center has an empty room and you want to run a birthday party there, you can use it. So we're helping, this system helps us to reuse city allocation and resources in a more efficient way. I'll say a word about the future. We're thinking about a city coin or other types of alternative currencies. You give me 2 hours of your work and I'll give you 2 hours of my work using the city platform without the interference of the city. And finally, one thing that we launched a month ago, and which is pretty funny, after we created Digitel, we created DigiDog. Tel Aviv has the highest rate of dogs per capita probably in any city. We love our dogs. And if you register your dog to this service, we will send you text messages on special events for dogs, on special vaccination days for dogs. To launch this service, we had a screening. If you know, there's a Hollywood movie called The Secret Lives of Pets. It's a 3D movie about pets. So we invited people and their dogs to the movie, and they sat down with glasses, both the people and the dogs, and they watched the movie. And it sounds funny, but in the city, we care a lot about our dogs. And this is a way that we managed to reach out to a very important community in the city using a technological device. And we're talking about how to do it for tourists as well. I want to say one word, because this is not a technological project, this is a human resources project. How do we do all of this? Remember I told you about the portals. There are 300 people in the municipality that serve as what we call knowledge champions. And what they do is, in addition to their daily work, and they're not being paid for this, they put information into a central portal about everything important that's happening in their department. So if the sanitation department, for instance, is going to be shut down tomorrow, they put it through a portal. If somebody's road is going to be blocked off, they put it in the portal. And then there's a few people that decipher that information and send it out to the various residents. So we have these 300 people essentially doing a job which is not their job, and they do it because the pride they have in their city and them wanting to give a better service to the residents. It's not a costly project, and our residents feel great because they're receiving, again, the benefits they want. Right now, by the way, we're partnering with 2 cities here in India, the city of Thane, which is implementing a sort of this service, and the city of Pune, which we're also cooperating with on issues of smart cities. And I'm very thankful for inviting me here today. Thank you for listening. And I wish you guys all the best. Thank you.
People-centric cities are characterized by a strong identity, a sense of community, and inclusivity. The role of technology in creating innovative participation mechanisms is to provide a sense of purpose and ensure that the vision includes all citizens and not just the elite. A successful city is one that not only attracts but also retains people. Creating a sense of ownership allows citizens to thrive. A fundamental aspect of this is the ability to enjoy the experience of public space. Thank you, Mr. Eitan Schwartz. We wish you and your team the very best in your endeavor to elevate Tel Aviv as the #1 preferred hub for technology startups in the world. And we also look forward to your contribution in the second panel. Thank you. The world is experiencing an unprecedented transition from predominantly rural to mainly urban living, with more than 55% of the world's population already living in urban areas, and this figure is set to rise to 70% by the middle of the 21st century. While rapid and spontaneous urbanization has presented the world's cities with major environmental, economic, and social challenges, cities also provide a positive force supporting social, political, and economic transformation. Will information technology enable in providing a similar quality of life, be it hamlets, villages, towns, cities? Will the distinction eventually disappear and reverse the thinking of migrating to cities by giving greater incentives to stay back, as there is more space, more time, and more contact with the total ecosystem, as well as the personal values of life, with the new potential to network at the global level? There are new trends emerging for the future which are not directly related to cities. But overall urbanization is not about building a city. It is in the context of larger socio-economical, metamorphical, physical and non-physical changing needs of the people. The illustrious panelists for this session, who are leaders in business, academia, urban planning, arts and humanities, will share their insights on the global dynamics in the context of urbanization. May I invite Mr. Amitabh Kant, CEO, Niti Aayog, Government of India, Mr. Anand Mahindra, Chairman, Mahindra Group, Mr. Antony Vivas, CEO at the City Transformation Agency, Barcelona, and former Deputy Mayor, Barcelona, Ms. Meenakshi Srinivasan, Chair, New York Life, New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission, and Mr. Eitan Schwartz, CEO, Tel Aviv Global.
Thank you. And it's a great honor to moderate this panel of, as you say, of city leaders, people who all have a passion for our urban space. I think I am surrounded by people who need no introduction. So I will keep this very, very short. It's a great honor that we, of course, have our chairman, Anand Mahindra, with us today, as well as Commissioner Amitabh Kant, who is a man who is synonymous with the, I would say, not only the branding, but the actual delivery of a modern India. And so as the CEO of Niti Aayog today, we're anxious to hear his views on the future and the direction of our urban space. With us on my left, of course, Antony Vivas, who we know for many years from the city of Barcelona, which is clearly, I think you saw in the video at the beginning, one of the leaders in creating a new urban space in Europe, and has been engaged not only there, but around the world now, including of course, here in India. And then Meenakshi, it's a great pleasure to have you back home again as a Delhiite, but one who has now created and literally put her mark on the face of the city of the world, New York City, and so is the chairwoman of the New York City Landmark Preservation Commission to speak to that. And of course, Eitan, we are all, now anxious to experience all of that nightlife of Tel Aviv that you have kindly presented us with. So we will bring you out one of these evenings. So thank you, gentlemen, lady. It's a great pleasure. I think we could just start off. I mean, this topic of urbanization next, it speaks to the future. It speaks to the trends. And I will just, one or two very quick facts. As was said, 65 million people a year coming to cities. 440 cities provide 50% of global growth. Those are all of our cities. Those are the Indian cities, the Chinese cities, the Asian and Middle Eastern cities. So this is kind of where the action is. But with all of that growth, you get a lot of stress. So 1.6 billion people lack affordable housing today. And I should note that 60% of the urban space that we need by the year 2030 has yet to be built. 60% of the space that we need by 2030 doesn't exist today. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do also to manage our cities going forward. Annually, catastrophes cost the world about $200 to $300 billion worth of costs in urban resilience catastrophes, whether it's water or fire or what have you. So future-proofing our cities is an issue. People, we have 350 million migrants, cross-border migrants, 90% of whom live in cities. And so anybody who lives in the age of Brexit and Donald Trump has sort of asked that question. And so, who are these people? How do they contribute? Importantly, how do we integrate them? And finally, jobs. We've had a lot of discussion about jobs and technology today, but the McKinsey Global Institute would say that 50% of all human activities that are performed today can be automated. 50% of all human activities today can be automated. So that means we're all going to learn a lot of new things. And how are we going to do that? And what is going to happen to the people who don't know how to do those things? What will be those new jobs, and how will we introduce them? So a lot of stress here. So we have to make choices. We have to make good choices. We have to make thoughtful choices about our land, about our buildings, about how we use our technology, and maybe most importantly about our people and how we liberate their potential. So with that as introduction, I'd love to start, if I could, Amitabh, with a bit of a discussion from yourself. And so how do you see the future, the vision for urbanization for India going forward?
Jonathan, every minute we speak here in India, there are 30 Indians who are moving from rural areas to urban areas. And, if you go by the latest McKinsey study, in the next 4 to 5 decades, you'll see 700 million Indians getting into the process of urbanization. And this really implies that the challenge for India is to create 2.5 Americas by 2050. Now, so obviously India will do more urbanization in the next 5 decades than what it has done in the last 5,000 years. The challenge is that when America urbanized, land, gas, and water were all cheaply available. So America had the luxury of living in New Jersey, traveling to New York, guzzling gas, having limousines, creating cities like Atlanta where 99% of the people travel by car. So Americans created the most polluting cities in the world. We don't have that luxury. So we'll have to create cities which are more compact, which are more dense, which are on the back of public transportation, which are based on recycling of water, recycling of waste, and yet have to be extremely livable. And therefore, the challenge for India really is, and India has been an extremely reluctant urbanizer. But to my mind, that's a huge advantage. The huge advantage is that we must move away from sprawling cities, embed our cities with public transportation, and that requires a lot of money in terms of infrastructure. Do really good spatial planning, but also use technology to leapfrog. And the opportunity for India is that it's the only country in the world with 1 billion biometrics. It's the only country in the world with 1 billion mobile. So virtually, you can manage your cities on the back of good mobile telephony and on a real-time basis. The challenge really is for India, to my mind, is that Indians must learn the art of monetization of land values. Urbanization cannot move forward in India till we do not monetize land value. For every bit of infrastructure that we create, we must learn the art of creating value out of it. That's number one. Number two, I think the regulations of municipalities are very outdated. And because they are outdated, there's no concept of special purpose vehicles which will enable you to do that monetization. So every new urbanization process that is done under the 74th Amendment, under a provision called 243Q, which has enabled you to create industrial cities. And to my mind, it's not possible for government to create or do all urbanization in the future. And if government does it, it will do shoddy urbanization. So the important thing is that it must delegate, decentralize, and allow a much greater level of private sector play in the process of urbanization. And this would necessitate some legislative changes which will enable private sector to pool land, to do their own master planning, to do their own trunk infrastructure, and to be able to monetize land values and create cities of the future. That's one. Number two is, on the existing cities, I think there's a huge challenge about raising
revenues by enhancing tariffs. There are cities in India, there's huge civilizational cities like India, like Varanasi, where water rates and electricity bills haven't been raised for the last 2 decades. I mean, you can't run a city till you don't charge market prices. And therefore, people are dying for good services. They want to pay the price, they want to pay, they want cities to be better managed. And therefore, it's necessary that services are provided at the right market prices. So the challenge for India has just begun. And it's important that we do it on the back of good planning, on the back of good legislation, on the back of good technology, on the back of good public transportation, and on the back of good recycling of water and good recycling of waste, which will enable better livability. I'm not touching on creativity, I'm not talking about culture, which are very essential component of great living. But for India right now is quality of infrastructure, which is critical.
Thank you. And if I could turn, building on a bit of what I was just saying, so you spoke a lot about the creativity of Tel Aviv and sort of the spirit. How do we make that link from creativity and culture and heritage to the quality of infrastructure, the actual or economic quality, economic development, and what is Tel Aviv doing to make that connection? Sort of how does all of this creativity actually help improve the quality of infrastructure and the quality of the city and its economy?
Well, if I may, actually, it was the reverse. Tel Aviv in the 1980s was on the verge of bankruptcy. The infrastructure was rotten. Nothing worked. The city was in debt. And the decision that the city made, and of course, the young people left. When you formed the family, you would leave, and only really old populations remained in Tel Aviv, or lower income populations. And it is the center of the country. I mean, the basic assets are all there. It was just mismanagement of the funding and a lack of investment. And the city made a decision 15 years ago to reinvest in the infrastructure, and essentially, for 5 to 7 years, probably I would say the mayor, who's been mayor for 18 years, was the most hated person in the city, because everybody had a grievance with the mayor one way or another. Their road was blocked, the road was open, something wasn't functioning, but he said, guys, patience. It needs patience. It's not a quick win, we have to redo everything. When the infrastructure was improved, when the cities became livable, fun, safe, walkable, people started returning. So the creativity came the other way around. It was always the artistic center of Israel, it was always a cultural center, but there was something about when the city became much more livable that people started returning. And I'll say one thing about the city, because it's so small and it's very walkable, we walk everywhere. And that's really one thing that to me is very apparent, but again, it's a totally different culture. We walk everywhere and everything happens in the street. I reached the point where I'm about to sell my car. I don't want it. I don't need it. I walk to work. If it's a bit more of a distance, I take a bicycle. We're now introducing a car sharing program. I don't want to have a car. There's no need for me to have a car. Having a car is selfish. I'm taking up the space with one car of so many people or bicycles that could be on the road, and there's no reason to have it. But that's a luxury you can have in a small city. But it's also a luxury you can have when walking on the street is so fun, and knowing that you're going to meet people on the street is so fun, and it's a safe street to walk on. That's when creative people start returning to the cities, and that's what happened in the city of Tel Aviv.
That's great to know. I mean, I'd love to pursue that question, especially about where did all the money come from in the first place to fix the city?
Quite honestly, we started charging what you just said. We started collecting tax. We did a good collection. So the person that wasn't furious about the mayor for opening up his street was furious for the mayor for collecting tax for the first time in an efficient way. But we started collecting. We started giving tickets for parking on the sidewalk. There was a culture of people parking on the sidewalk with complete chaos, and it was known that like after 11 p.m. you can just park on the sidewalk because you're going out to a bar. And no, you'd come home at 2 o'clock in the morning, you'd leave the bar, smack, there was a ticket on your window. So people, there was like I would say it was like gambling. You'd say, okay, I'll leave my car. There are chances of 1 out of 5 that'll be ticketed. So it's worth my while to leave my car on the sidewalk because the fine, I'll deal with it if I'm given a fine for every 5 times I leave my car on the sidewalk. But then when you start getting a fine every time you leave your car on the sidewalk, and we're chasing you with the lawyers to pay your fines, then it took 5 years, it took 7 years. I mean, we're not the fastest people, Israelis, but eventually we get the point. So people realize you can't leave your car on the sidewalk anymore. So when you erase chaos and there's law and order in the streets, and you create a very pleasant environment, that's when people, I say, go back to enjoying the city. And most of our taxes, in the case of Israel, we have a different legal system than most places. The city tax is based mainly on businesses. There are a lot of businesses in the city, and that's their main source of income.
Okay, that's great. I love that story, and I think I'm going to use it again. So Anand, if I could turn to you a bit. One of the other things that we've talked, we're here at the Mahindra World City, but we're also, as I said, in the era of deglobalization, as people say, or this economic nationalism. How do these things go together? Or what is your vision for the relevance of globalization in the context of what appear to be a lot of cross currents, a lot of turbulence, a lot of people saying we want less globalization?
One of the reasons I'm very allergic to coming on a panel with Amitabh is he usually leaves you with nothing to say when he's done. And I do agree with a lot of what he says. Two of the points that he stressed on, I'm going to expand on, and that was really about decentralization. That was one of the themes that ran across his comments. And empowerment. He talked about private participation. I don't think he meant the corporate sector in a sense, but it was about empowerment of people. So to go back to your question, Jonathan, it's not so much deglobalization that worries me. I could go on about deglobalization and what the world, according to Trump, might mean. And I think I'll skip that now. I think the real trend we have to watch out for is the death of the megalopolis. That concept, to my mind, has to be put to rest. Somehow, as we went past when we went through the past decades, the model was that the city is what made a country productive. You got enormous gains in productivity when you moved from rural areas to cities. Urbanization is what caused modernity. If you look back, there was no productivity gains for decades, and for centuries sometimes, in rural cities. It was urbanization that created productivity. And the larger the city became, the more productive you were. Somehow that model is broken. You alluded to it a lot in your opening comments. First of all, keeping up with infrastructure needs is becoming impossible. Keeping up with rural-urban migration is becoming an enormous social problem. And we're not China. We don't run like China where you can flick a switch and tell people you will move in this month from the countryside to the city and back. So rural-urban migration in India is a problem that cannot be sorted out the way China has done. When you look at economically what's happening to cities, frankly speaking, infrastructure itself is breaking down the productivity gains. The Gini coefficient, in fact, has become worse in cities with globalization. So you're getting divisions into ghettos, which are dividing people apart. And the social pressures where people are losing a sense of identity and community is breaking identities apart. So I'm afraid nothing is working. One of the things I wrote about, in fact, in a recent McKinsey publication was that we have to reimagine how India is going to urbanize. And we have to use that concept of decentralization. So rather than imagining the world as a network of megalopolises, New York connected to London, to Tel Aviv, to Paris, and that's what the vision of our world is. I think first of all in India we've got to realize our goal is not to create those kind of urban agglomerations which will match up to the mega cities of the future. We have to decentralize. So what happens to productivity then? Are we going to give that up? Well, that's where I think the death of distance, as Francis Cairncross put it so eloquently, comes to our aid. You don't have to sacrifice productivity anymore. Digital technologies and communication allow you, if you're sitting in a village using 3D printing technology, you can manufacture automotive parts for my vehicles, which, by the way, Aita and I keep hoping to sell, even though you vowed never to buy a car. I'm hoping we will be able to sell some of them and need some spare parts. But they might be made right in the village where I might need that spare part. Or an artisan might upgrade their output and their products using 3D printing and directly sell to the world or to the other cities in India. So I think we have to challenge the notion that productivity cannot be improved in smaller urban agglomerations. I think Mahindra is putting its money where its mouth is by creating these kinds of smaller agglomerations. Mahindra World City, Jaipur and Chennai are experiments in that direction. And I want to end with the idea of community. I know Amitabh said he didn't have enough time to talk about that, but he said that's important. We've learned the hard way. Anita and Sangeeta will remember when we put up Mahindra World City, Chennai. To be honest, we did it as if we were playing SimCity, you know, a kind of game that we were playing, and here's your work area, here's your living area, here's the hospital, and it was just a Lego set of things that we had put together. We forgot about how do you build community? What are the intangibles you build? How do you get people to come in and build a nightlife? It's not by just plotting things on a map. And I would dare say Sangeeta's goal right now is to build those. So what's as important for her as building a hospital? It's creating a marathon, which occurs in Mahindra World City, Chennai, to draw people together, creating a signature artistic event. Those are the kinds of things that we have to do, which will restore a sense of community and identity, and those are best done in smaller agglomerations. You had a chart, I think, item of citizen to citizen was your last item. The most critical. One of the investments I've made personally is in a small startup called Local Circles here, which is about citizen to citizen contact to bring transparency and accountability in governance. That, combined with smaller agglomerations and the restoration of community, plus technology that allows you to be global and productive, I think that's where the future of cities lie. So may 1,000 cities bloom is what I say.
Thank you. Very well put. And I wanted to build on one of the things you said, is how to reimagine the city and sort of reimagine the community. I think that's a very clear and specific and vision of what it could be and what it could look like. And we, of course, have two people here with us who are in the business of reimagining cities. So if I could start with you, Meenakshi, as you do your work on looking at the fabric of where we have in the cities today and imagining what could it be. How do you think about that? What is your design philosophy, if you will?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy to be here and to talk about my experience in New York. And so New York it's the global capital of the city, of the world. And it has a booming economy. Its population is on the rise. And perhaps many people think it doesn't have inherent issues that continue to plague it, but it does. And I just want to talk a little bit about those. But some of the conversations I've been hearing about whether they should be smaller cities or larger cities, in the US context, I think there's great opportunity to densify existing urban centers and really capitalize on the existing infrastructure as well as its building stock. I think one of the things that we can think about in terms of the existing environment is that it reflects the history of places and embodies the identity of cities and metropolises. So I think it has a real connection to its population and citizens. And that's something that's difficult to replicate when you talk about new centers. And I think the suburbanization of America sort of speaks to that. So New York has always had a culture of innovation, of progress, of reinvention, and of evolution. And it continues to modernize. It's about 400 years old, and it has different layers of history. And it continues to modernize, but its existing built fabric hasn't been put to the wayside, but it continues to be protected. And over the last 50 years, since protections were put in place for for historic sites and neighborhoods, we have seen that, that in fact, the preservation of these neighborhoods, they stabilize neighborhoods, they spur economic development, they promote tourism, education, recreation, welfare, and they foster civic pride. So I think that in a case like New York, which needs to be competitive, how do you balance both the existing fabric and allow growth to take place? And I want to give an example of New York Central Business District, which is East Midtown. It's the largest central business district in the world, and in the eastern portion, it has about 60 million square feet of office development, about 250,000 jobs, and it's home to many of the Fortune 500 companies. The area developed in the turn of the 20th century when the Grand Central Terminal, which is the major transportation hub and infrastructure of New York City, connecting to all the 5 boroughs, but also to the region, particularly to the north and along the east coast of commercial centers. So it developed in the turn of the century, and right now it's doing very well, but when we think about in the future, how does it remain competitive? And I think for city planners, we have to contend with 2 issues. One is that the district itself has no land, and in fact, that's one of the issues. Businesses are coming to the area, but they're relocating outside of New York because there's no space to build. The second thing is that the existing building stock is old. It's about 100 years old, and it may not be able to accommodate modern commercial needs and also be able to incorporate modern technologies and building systems. So one of the things that New York City did was to think about how do we plan for the future of this area to remain competitive, and how do we balance both growth and preservation. And so it really was an integrated strategy, and my agency, what we were tasked to do was look at the area and identify historic resources and analyze them, and we concluded that within a very small area, which is about 75 blocks, we already had 38 buildings that were landmarked, and they represented 3 development phases in the area. We did further analysis and identified 12 additional buildings that we felt should be protected. And that would make a sum total of 50 buildings within the small area, which would really ensure that for future generations, you will always be able to see within its streetscape the legibility of the history of the area. At the same time, the Department of City Planning was looking at incentives to really allow for the redevelopment of some of these older buildings. And that was done by allowing more density that could be attained for building, which would allow these buildings that were obsolete to be demolished and rebuilt for Class A office buildings. And this was done through incentives, including being able to transfer development potential from protected buildings, or to actually enter into a fund. And the fund would pay not only for the preservation of these historic buildings, but also pay for the infrastructure enhancements both to the infrastructure and to the public realm. And I think this was a good model for a city to, for other cities to look at when you have a much more integrated approach to planning. It touches upon many of the things that have been talked about today: the need for improvement of infrastructure, capitalizing on our existing assets, thinking about the human factor and how people relate to their environments. And so I just wanted to share that with you. And perhaps a little bit later we can talk about housing, which is another issue that's pretty important.
Well, thank you. I mean, that gives us a very clear picture of how, again, the redevelopment process can work in a very established and a historic area, but one with still a lot of growth potential. So you don't want to sacrifice the one for the other. But let me turn to Antonio, and we talk a bit about technology. I mean, I know we do lots of things in Barcelona, but you're particularly identified with technology. And Aidan gave us the Pixar dogs example. Let me give you another movie, WALL-E. Some of you remember WALL-E as the, the spaceship Earth, where everybody sort of sits around in chairs and uses their technology to interact with each other, and has some harmful social externalities. Everybody seems to be very large. And they don't exercise very much, and they're isolated, and they have dysfunctional relationships. How do we avoid that? I mean, is that dystopia a risk, or what is, because we've said a lot about the good parts of technology, but are there some concerns that our digitization of our online life takes away from our actual physical life?
I don't know what happened when printing books were started, when the books started to run around the place. Perhaps there were some people that fought them. Could anyone imagine our life without printed books today? No. Can anyone imagine life without this today? No. Amitabh said something very, very clever and very clear. Why should we avoid using this when today this produces, perhaps this thing that I wear in my pocket is the weapon, the biggest weapon of mass creation that we have ever thought to have? I mean, that's stupid. You remember during the Industrial Revolution, we had those, I don't know the word for that in English, Luddites, those people, Luddites, throwing the steam machines to the river. I think that discussing about these things is a waste of time. It is true that we have to learn how to use them, but we've been talking about 3D printing. One of the things that we did and that we are spreading all over the place in the world is we produced what we call athenaeums of fabrications. An athenaeum of fabrication is a place that we put as an administration together with the private sector. We put some 3D printers, and we teach people, no matter the age, no matter the training, to use the 3D printers. You cannot imagine the success in the poorest and the richest quarters of Barcelona. If you ever came to Barcelona, just underneath Camp Nou, if you like football, Camp Nou is a place where my team plays, the best team in the world plays. Well, very close to that, you have one of the biggest athenaeums of fabrication. Why the word athenaeum? When my grandfather was a mechanic. He wasn't trained, he didn't go to school, but he had a social conscience, and he went to the Athenaeum once he finished his job. The Athenaeum was a place in which some people taught him to write and read. So why shouldn't we do the same thing today? So digitalization is exactly the contrary of what these people against it says. I want to say something about urbanization. I'm the last one speaking now, so I have the chance of... the first thing, we're in India. I work here roughly 1 week per month. Thanks God you're not China. Thanks God you're not China. I'm not because I don't admire the Chinese, but I think that the Chinese copied the worst things of the Western world. When you decide to build city with asparagus, I call them, you are perhaps solving your thirst and hunger of today, but you're generating the social divide of tomorrow. Today, those fellows coming from the countryside, they remember where they come from. Their sons and daughters, their grandsons and granddaughters, they know that they live in the banlieue. And today we have to divide the world into two hemispheres, not the developed world and the underdeveloped world. Can anyone tell me in this country what is developed and underdeveloped? This country that produces the biggest number of IT engineers, is this a developing country? Come on. We have to divide the world between urbanized world and under-urbanized world. And we have under-urbanization in Paris. Yes, we have it. La banlieue is an under-urbanized world. And we have under-urbanization here. The problem that we have is that anyone sees that even though we know all these figures, any presentation that we have, in 20 years' time, 80% of the population, blah, 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 why don't we do anything? Cities are two things. Cities are obsolescent factories of living, and we have to invest money in that, public money and private money, I'm sorry, I don't agree with these people that say that we don't have to invest in metro because metro is not economically sound. I mean, is economically sound, parks and recreation maintenance. I think that we have to change a little bit our mentality. And the other thing is these cities that are converted into provisional camps of refugees. That's what our immigrants are, thinking that they live in a transition period, but we stabilize them. And they are there for generations, and we create this horrible suburban world. And then we think all of a sudden that we cannot solve it. That's false. And I want to go back to what Amitabh Khan said before. Now that we have everyone identified, now that we can track them, now that we know what they want, can't we start talking to them directly? For the first time in humankind history, we can talk directly to the person, to that specific person, and then we can add up them all to generate the necessary budget to solve that social problem. That had never happened before, and we keep thinking about the budgeting of things as we did it 30, 40, 100 years ago. That's a real mistake. So you know what? We need new clients, and that's why we need, and I finish with this, that's why we need to train our mayors, our commissioners, our city officials, even our empresarios, I'm sorry for my English, our empresarios, to become good clients. Good clients. One of people say, why did Barcelona have such a success? Yeah, it's true. We punch much above our weight, much above our weight. We know it. We knew it. And I do punch myself much above my own weight, even though I'm big, much above my own weight. Why? Because we tried to become good clients of the best vendors of the world. When I see screens, when I see a vendor selling me screens and a wonderful control room, I say goodbye. I'm not interested. Please, Mr. Vendor, talk to me. And some people know me, I always repeat this. Talk to me about Miss Sita. Miss Sita, this lady, 75 years old, living in slum in Mumbai. We know where she is. Now, do we know whether she can afford her housing? Do we know whether she opens every day or closes her refrigerator? Because we can know that. Do we know whether she walks? Do we know whether she takes her pill? We can know that. We can know that today. Why don't we start talking about Miss Sita with the Mr. Mahindras of the world? We need intelligent developers. We're talking about this building cities to last. We need developers to last also. Developers to last. Smart city need smart developer. I love this fractality here. We need fractal developments, smart fractal developments, little by little, making money, monetizing, yes, but then little by little, growing little by little, and making sure that we work with what we are. You have a tremendous civilization. You are one of the most amazing cultures on earth. Work with it. I cannot teach you anything. No one of us. And then you have these Anglo-Saxons dressed in black, telling you things, and then you build kind of Los Angeles. I kill myself. I mean, it's horrible. And on the other hand, you have a huge opportunity, and you have to go for it. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. As someone who commutes between Los Angeles and Shanghai, I'm slightly concerned. let me turn back to you, Amitabh. I mean, you've heard. We've started the debate. We've heard of these ideas, and building on what Tony just said, how do we help people become better clients or better decision makers? What is the role of? How do we make these decisions? And what are some of your observations on governance at this point?
I've traveled to Barcelona, and I've seen what a remarkable city Antonio has made it into. It's a great city because it's got history, it's got civilization, but it's also a very contemporary society because they've used public transportation, they've used power grid, they've used walking, cycling, they've used the power of good data analytics, and therefore it's a fascinating city which has blended technology, cycling, walking, with its civilization. And in contrast, I've thought, when Mahindra first started its World City in Chennai, it was ahead of its time, actually. And I've traveled several times to Mahindra City, Jaipur, and it's a great example of what private sector can achieve in India. And it's demonstrated that it's capable of doing unique planning, unique infrastructure, attracting the best companies, the best talent, if you are able to create great quality infrastructure. My view is that in India, you need hundreds of Mahindra World Cities. And you need hundreds of entrepreneurs to blossom here. And, urbanization has just begun. It's going to continue unabated. If you don't do it in a planned manner, it will happen in a very unplanned manner, as it is happening when you travel from here to Jaipur. You see all the way it's urbanization in a very unsustainable, unplanned manner. And therefore, we must do it in a very planned manner. We must do it in a manner where we allow really good planning to come in and good infrastructure to be created. And when we do, one of the great advantages of India is that India has just begun this process of infrastructure. So today, if you were to transport goods from the northern part of India, Delhi to Mumbai, it takes 14 days for goods to reach. But by 2018, you will have the dedicated freight corridor, which will enable goods to be put in 14 hours. And this will open vast areas, and actually right now in the Delhi-Mumbai corridor, there are 5 new cities which are under construction. Well planned, they have good planning, good infrastructure, public transportation embedded with all the smart technology in it. So there's really good opportunity. And what these cities will do, and what the new 100 smart cities and the Amrit programs, we have two major programs now. India did not have an urbanization program for many, many years. So right now, this new government has brought in 2 programs. One is the 100 smart cities of India, and it's brought in a new Amrit program for urbanization. What these programs will do is, one is that existing cities are being smartened up, and smartened up not in terms of mere technology, but in how to create better infrastructure. How do we make them better livable cities? That's number one. And number two, and how do we use technology in all these areas to leapfrog? And second is that on the back of the Delhi-Mumbai corridor and the Calcutta-Amritsar corridor, we are opening up vast areas. And on the Chennai-Bangalore corridor, we'll open up vast areas which will enable new urbanization to take place. And when you do new urbanization, it's possible for you to plan, embed your cities with new technology, and do really compact, dense. And I'm a real believer in good, compact, dense development on the back of good transportation. And my belief is that if you do that good, compact planner, unfortunately, our urban planners have all been trained in America. And they're all living on outdated, dead processes of planning. The American model of urbanization is dead. And that, the earlier we bury it, the better it is in India. And I think many of the lessons of urbanization come from the eastern part of the world and not the western part of the world. They come from Singapore in water management. They come from a city called Kitakyushu in Japan, where everything is recycled, where the women of which drove industrialization, but which the Dokai Bay on which it is based became absolutely yellow from blue. So the women of Japan rose in revolt, and Methi worked with them to make it the most recyclable city. They come from Yokohama, which was able to reduce its waste by almost 40%. One single mayor brought the waste reduction down to 40%. So my belief is that India has this great opportunity. It's been a reluctant urbanizer. It's this great opportunity to learn from all these great innovative lessons from across the world and use technology. No other country in the world has this ability to have billion biometrics and 1 billion mobile phones to be able to crack urbanization on a real-time basis and allow data analytics and financial inclusion to take place. So India can't follow the model of the Western world. That model is dead. And if you were to follow that model, the world would require 4 planet Earth. Whether we like it or not, we have 1 planet Earth. And therefore, India has this opportunity to do innovative and sustainable urbanization, which can then become the model for the rest of the world.
Thank you. And a call for all of our developers to think about that death of American urbanization and creation of the new model. So Anand, the new model. I mean, you have a background actually which is a little bit atypical perhaps. I mean, in the sense I understand your undergraduate degree included photography and other liberal arts. And you, of course, Mahindra's done a lot in design. You know, you guys remember I read your speech to the Institute in Ahmedabad Design, the commencement speech, and speaking about the XUV 500 and as well as the revolutions that are needed in public space in Mumbai. I'm just curious, what do you see? I mean, what are the opportunities for you as a developer, as an impresario, to change the language of design, to change, to follow, if you will, what Amitabh's calling for, this a new version that draws on the history and traditions of the East, but explores them and develops them in a contemporary and a future-looking context?
I think it's somewhat better known now that my undergraduate degree was in filmmaking, but I have a deeper and darker secret actually, which is that before I went for my filmmaking degree, I was studying architecture in Mumbai, in the JJ School of Architecture, and very serendipitously it went on strike, so I was forced to apply abroad. Otherwise, I would have been a very poor architect today. But I remember when I did go to college and I was studying filmmaking, this was at Harvard, and they have a wonderful graduate school of design called the Gund School. Beautiful building, but it's concrete, very Corbusier-like. I used to hang around there just because of my penchant for architecture. And what I saw really influenced my worldview, if you will, about how communities spring up. These kids had carols, as they called them, on each of these levels. It was shaped like a piano, that building, different levels. And each one was very geometrically allotted a space. After the first month of a semester, you couldn't recognize it because the people who were given a carol had changed its shape. There were potted plants coming out of somewhere. There were bizarre sculptures emerging elsewhere. And it began to look like a kind of clean slum. It was not the kind of orderly environment that people had envisioned. And what I recognized there as a young 18-year-old has stayed with me today. You know, spaces don't conquer people. People adapt and change the spaces they live in. And that's always struck me, which is why the whole theme of decentralization and empowerment, I think, makes sense to me. It applies to everything we do in design. So coming back to your question, Jonathan, what do I think has to happen? Yes, I agree with Amitabh that we have to find a new model, but I'm going to be a little bit of an apologist for one part of America, and that was this remarkable woman called Jane Jacobs. And anyone who studied architecture or planning knows her. And that poor lady argued vociferously against the urban model that you railed against. When urban renewal came to New York and they created these concrete landscapes, they were beautiful on paper, and what happened? They became scenes of crime because they were not populated at night. And Jane Jacobs used Boston's North End to define how cities should be populated. They should be dense. In fact, we should not be arguing against Dharavi. We should be looking at what we can do with the slum of Dharavi to improve its amenities, not change its shape. Because she said there is no crime in the North End because Big Mama is watching out of the balcony and knows if anyone's going to abduct any kid. Whereas in any geometrically planned neighborhood, Big Mama wouldn't be able to see anyone. And so density, compactness create stuff. And I was a little disappointed, Meenakshi, you didn't mention Brooklyn when you were talking about New York. You have the future of the universe in New York. I mean, I would argue with you, Aitan, that before you think Tel Aviv is king of the heap, look at Brooklyn. Brooklyn, within New York, is, in my opinion, one of the most innovative and the biggest startup center in the world. You've got some competition, Aitan. You know, it's not going to be a walkthrough for you. So how did New York create this? I think it's because artists went there. And your danger now is that if you start creating more domino-type developments that you've got, the Dumbos of the world, and the artist gets squeezed out of that place, Brooklyn will lose its ability to be a startup nation. So coming back to your point, what's the real essence of design? It's going back to people. It's starting with communities. That is the essence of design, not a T-square or a drafting board. It's not about Corbusier and Chandigarh. It's about the North End. It's about Brooklyn in its original form. We have to start with people, and I dare say Arun, Anita, Sangeeta, all of us learned that the hard way. The next Mahindra World City is going to be built around communities, and then we will design the structures around them.
Just about Brooklyn. Brooklyn really is a sort of phenomenon right now, and I think people have seen certain neighborhoods which have really become tourist attractions as well. So it's the largest borough in New York City and is very varied. It has neighborhoods which are very comparable to neighborhoods in Manhattan. And there are other areas which have grown organically, including artists that have come there. And it was previously manufacturing space. And with people leaving these buildings empty, they've been taken over by artists. But one thing I would say is that there's organic trends that will happen. And Soho had artists, and that what brought people there. Those same artists went to Chelsea. The same artists went to Williamsburg. Now Williamsburg has people in the tech sector. They have people who work in Manhattan, wealthy people, and the artists have moved to Bushwick. I think this kind of phenomenon is hard to sort of freeze in time. But I want to talk about one thing in terms of Brooklyn and planning for Brooklyn, is that, and it's related to infrastructure as well, is that there's always been this trend in New York that everybody goes and works in Manhattan. The ones who have the resources stay in Manhattan, can walk to work, but others live in the other 4 boroughs. The real strategy change is to think about places of employment outside of Manhattan and to provide infrastructure in those boroughs. So the interesting thing about Brooklyn is that, in fact, you have great potential for economic centers along the waterfront. There are neighborhoods like Sunset Park, there's Williamsburg, and this waterfront actually goes all the way to Queens, connecting major satellites in Queens as well. The problem is that the infrastructure always takes you through Manhattan. And so how do you think about developing infrastructure in a borough, which, as many have pointed out, going below grade is very, very expensive, and also allow for new communities where there's available land, where people can both work and live. And so one of the proposals right now is called BQX, which is a light rail that will run from one area along the waterfront of Brooklyn, Sunset Park, and it'll go all the way around the waterfront of Brooklyn into the waterfront of Queens. And these neighborhoods have already started developing. And so this, the BQX is a way of, with much less intervention in terms of infrastructure and much less disruption in terms of two communities that already exist there, is going to provide, or hopes to provide, access to people all between Brooklyn and Queens, and also between different neighborhoods in Brooklyn. And so I think, I hadn't forgotten about Brooklyn, but that borough will grow as well, and probably is now, and it will be the future of New York.
Now, I don't want to neglect the people, as in the people. So I would love to give everybody a chance to ask 1 or 2 questions, but very quickly before we do that, I mean, I'll ask if Tony and Aitan, could you give one idea that you think would make a huge difference in the planning and development and design of our cities? I mean, I'll just put that there as a question, but I know you also had a comment you wanted to make. So.
I'm going to tell you a story, a real one, about what Mr. Mahindra said some minutes ago. We made a huge mistake in Barcelona. Some of you have been to Barcelona. You know that we have some quarters up in the hill. Some of them are very poor. So we pretend to be very good architects. In fact, yesterday we knew that the new Pritzker Prize is awarded to a group of Catalan architects. I'm a Catalan, for if you don't notice it. So we decided to build wonderful social housing for those people living in those slums up in the hills. So those families had been living together for 60 years. It was one of the biggest mistakes I made in my life, because yes, we gave them a very nice apartment, but we broke forever their social life. So what we did right after that, when we realized what we did, we decided not to do that anymore, and we decided to work on the recuperation of all those slums, and house by house, I don't know how to say that, barrack by, I don't know how to say that, you can imagine, brick by brick, recuperating those places, because the social bonds are much more important than any good architect. Then, of course, you need good architects to do that, and you need all the technology that you can imagine. But first of all, the social bonds. And the second one, I want to just very, very quickly, there are 10 core in this new society that we have to learn to manage. I'm going to list them all. We have to learn how to co-work. We have to learn how to co-care. How to, I'm going to say, how to co-leisuring. We have to generate leisure together. Co-learning, co-teaching, co-growing, co-creating, co-designing, co-building, and co-living. This is what the digital world is bringing to us, and this is the kind of society that we here in India can be perhaps the first in the whole earth to really develop and being able to touch it.
I think that's a great spur to action. I'm just going to note that most urban planners are men, and perhaps having a few more women in the profession might help to have a little bit more of that listening part. Anyway, Eitan, what's your thought? How are you going to change the world?
I'll tell you a short story. My wife comes from a very special, unique type of habitat called kibbutz. I don't know if you've heard about the kibbutz. Some people are nodding. It was an amazing Israeli invention, a collective society, probably around maybe 400 or 500 families that lived together on a collective society. First it was agricultural, then some of them developed industry. They had nothing of their own, and it was completely shared. We abandoned that model. The mayor of Tel Aviv is also from a kibbutz, and what he is trying to do now in this ultra-capitalist city is create what he calls the kibbutz in the city. Because the kibbutz provides the community, and you mentioned this so many times, three basic things which we all want. The best services on earth, for cheap or for free, and everything within walking distance. If you have those three conditions, you're a happy human being. So what we are thinking of now in Tel Aviv is, because land is so scarce, and resources are so scarce, why do we need to own everything on our own when we could be sharing? Yesterday I wanted to press my shirt. So I called the reception. I said, can I have an iron? They said, no, but if you go down the floor, there's an ironing board there. That's brilliant. Why do I need an iron in my house? I use it once a week. Why don't I have an iron sharing with my neighbors? And today in Tel Aviv, in community centers, we will give you an iron. We will give you a camping tent. We will give you all those things that men like to buy and never use, right? A drill. How many times do you use the drill after you buy it? Once in a lifetime. So there's a communal drill. You take it, you hang the picture, and you give it back, and you don't need to take up space. That's why we're using more and more car sharing schemes. So the more we think about sharing, I think that's the future of cities. A lot of people talk about the necessity of a subway, of transit between places. Let's start thinking about buildings as a community. The elevator is the subway, right? Instead of going from point A to point B, within the building of 50 stories, you're going from your apartment, maybe to a communal dining hall, maybe to a communal playground for children, all in one building, and those 50 stories start becoming your community. And that is when in a city like ours, where land is so scarce and there's so much competition over space, that is probably the future. We can't expand anymore. We have no more room to expand, and the future is getting more and more crowded, smaller apartments, giving up the possessions that we don't really need on a daily basis and sharing what we can with our other neighbors.
It's great. And so I should note that Hong Kong is actually doing that legislation now. Every 10 stories is going to have a communal space in it. So you got it, because they have obesity in kids, because they're not running in the streets, so you got to get them running in the buildings. I heard the bell. I got 5 minutes. Let me just ask, can I get 1 or 2 questions from the audience? And no questions, not comments, please. Any questions? Shirish, do you have a question? Okay. Yes, in the back, right there. Okay. A short one that we can react to.
Yeah, my name is Hari, and I think in the Indian context, our bazaar is an excellent model to study. And there is some bit of study that's happened in urban planning around Indian bazaar. Very efficient, community, and so on. The second comment, if I could, I've been sort of involved in city matters like water, energy, and so on, though it's not my day job. And when we look at how can Bangalore get to be Tel Aviv, the issue that we have is our citizens are not adequately engaged. In my view, I think it's a colonial legacy. At that point in time, it was the colonial departments which managed public good. After we got to be independent, we delegated it to our governments and local bodies. We just voted. I think that is changing. Citizens will demand accountability from local governments and state governments and so on and so forth. That's where I see hope.
The bazaar speaks.
I think your comment on bazaars, on markets is absolutely perfect. We based our recuperation of some of our quarters in the recuperation of the markets as a public policy together with private sector. And this is something that we are talking about to do in Pune. We are doing that in Colombia, where they have wonderful markets. And just one comment. Put technology in the oldest part of your city. Those parts are the ones that have more identity. Those are the parts in which the local talent, young talent, creativity will want to be. If I can choose between an old building full of history, inspiring me, or typical glass facade building of the last 10 years, I will go to the identity one for sure, even though I'm not young, but for sure the youngsters are going to go there. So markets, old stones, technology, creativity, they all go together.
Other comments on that? Okay.
I just want to respond or agree with what the gentleman was saying about civic engagement. And this was spoken about in the last panel as well. And I think that part, so the future also means not just a vision of what something will look like, but the process of how do you get there. And I think that we've all learned that that involving communities early actually pays off in the end of developing the vision, but also getting real buy-in and commitment to their communities. So, that's another thing that I think all of us as planners, whether we're developers or we're in government or we're nonprofits, should always continually think about how to engage the public in the process.
And on that note, I want to thank the panel very much. It's been a great conversation.
There are a couple of questions from our social media followers. The first one is for Mr. Kant. What is unique about India's urban growth according to you?
To my mind, right now it's all important that our process has just begun. So, in the next 4 to 5 decades, we'll see a huge amount of urbanization. And right now, it's pretty unplanned. And the future needs to be extremely well planned. It needs to be embedded with infrastructure. It needs to have better livability. And it needs better transportation and better technology. And I think urbanization is one area where India can leapfrog in many ways, learning from good examples of many countries, and we can create a lot of wealth, better livability, better creativity of the future through the process of urbanization.
Thank you. And the second one is for Mr. Mahindra. What are the aspects of city building you find most exciting?
That's the wrong question. The question is, what are the aspects I don't find exciting? That would be a shorter answer. But no, I'm going to sound like a broken record. But it is about the interaction and the dynamics of people. It's exactly what I said earlier. I gave one example about the Harvard Graduate School of Design, but let me go to another one. When I first heard Charles Correa talk about one of his projects, the late Charles Correa, it was not about one of his monumental structures. He talked about pavement dwellers in Mumbai, and he said, before we keep talking about building visions for low-cost housing for them, he said, they have a community there already. Why don't we just have a plan to, at every few meters, provide drinking water, to provide amenities to them, a little point where they can get electric power. Their lives are not being lived badly. They have communities. We just need to adapt to their communities. Again, a very, very seminal thing that stuck in my mind. And to me, that's excitement. It's not about brick or mortar. It's not about giant structures. It's not about Zaha Hadid and her monumental structures. It's about somebody listening to how people actually live. That's what excites me about planning.
Thank you. When it comes to new cities, there is no one-size-fits-all model. Each has their own particularities and degrees of freedom to explore. New cities cannot be fully planned before being built, either from a technology standpoint or from a socio-economic one. No matter how cutting-edge current technology might be, disruptive innovation can come at any moment and shadow past technologies. From a socio-economic standpoint, societies worldwide are experiencing major challenges in culture and identity that no planner can forecast. Creating what makes residents secure and happy can provide the way forward for new city builders to create unique urban environments where people thrive. Citizens will shape the city in which they live, and planners must allow them to do so. This is precisely the reason why, to some extent, city must be planned for flexibility. Flexibility means building today what is needed today and building tomorrow what is needed tomorrow. This sort of just-in-time approach to city building can facilitate the financing of new structure by capitalizing on growing land value and using taxing mechanisms to capture revenue. I now invite Ms. Anita Arjundas, MD and CEO of Mahindra Lifespace Developers Limited, to present mementos as a token of appreciation to our distinguished panelists. I request our panelists to remain on stage for a photo opportunity, please. It has been a delightful afternoon, and I feel privileged to have got an opportunity to host the third edition of Confluence, Mahindra World City's Thought Leadership Forum. I, on behalf of my colleagues at Mahindra Life Spaces and Mahindra World City, would like to thank our distinguished speakers and panelists for sharing their insights and their vision for creating cities of the future. We are sure we can work together and create a blueprint for successful city planning and governance for cities in India. We are greatly encouraged by some of the insights shared by colleagues from their countries, which have sown the seeds for creating successful communities, and we would continue to work together and create a pool of knowledge which will form the foundation of communities in the future. I wish to express our profuse thanks to the team at McKinsey, our knowledge partners, for their tireless efforts in harmonizing this orchestra and creating a symphony of the best minds. Today's session would not have been lively and insightful without the wholehearted participation of our distinguished guests and audience. We thank you for taking time off from your busy schedules to join us this afternoon. I also wish to express my sincere thanks to ICE Global, our event partners, ET Now, our media partners, the general manager and staff at Taj Mansingh for ensuring smooth the conduct of this event. To my colleagues at Mahindra World City and Mahindra Life Spaces, the sleepless nights and tireless efforts have paid off. I'm proud to be part of this wonderful team. Thank you for your support. Thank you all very much and have a great evening.